Events began to happen when the hero one day, I started seeing strange numbers in front of me. They simply hovered over the heads of those around them. He had no idea what they could mean. At first he thought that he was just imagining things, but over time he began to see them more and more often and more clearly. They could not be the remaining years of life, or even their strength points. It was unknown what they could mean. Not understanding what these numbers were, the guy thought that he had completely gone crazy. He had no instructions for this strange ability, and it drove him crazy. The hero decided to ignore them for the rest of his life, but there was no need for this, because the truth was like an anvil that had fallen right on his head. Events continued to take place in the hero's house. His brother's name was Woo Hyun, and the hero did not understand what was happening to his mother. And also, he did not understand what his brother was doing. His mother considered herself worthless, and it was incredibly sad. The brother hated that he was born into this family and asked him not to dare stand in his way anymore. The guy watched in horror as his brother began to leave, realizing that he might never see him again. The door was closed with a loud bang, and the hero and his mother were left alone. His life was too terrible to worry about random numbers that only he could see. The hero took on any work he could do. For his mother and himself he worked until exhaustion. Believing that his life would be better if he studied, he did so every chance he got. In the end, his efforts paid off. The guy got a job in the communications department of one damn well-known company, and it seemed that life was finally getting better. Unfortunately, he did not yet know that his nightmare was just beginning. The main character's name was Jaeyoung. A girl came up to him and asked if he had finished working, and then suggested that he go out for a drink and something stronger, but the guy refused, because he was working with an asset management book. His colleagues were amazed that the poor guy was working, and no one was even going to reward him for his work. Suddenly, Jaeyoung discovered some numbers and thought that he might have made a mistake in the calculations. Because of this, he thought that their company was so mired in debt and taxes, but suddenly, he realized that he recognized these numbers. After that, he immediately approached his boss. It seemed to him that they were pretty far down in debt over the past year, but the boss told him to just ignore it. The guy was indignant, because tax evasion is illegal, but the boss categorically told him not to pay attention to it, and said that everything was fine. It was at this moment that one name came to his mind. Vice President Hyalong Jong. The number above his head exceeded 100 billion, and the number of unpaid taxes was identical to the figure that hung over the head of the vice president. He seemed kind and got along great with everyone, but he was siphoning so much money out of the company. Jaeyoung immediately explained to the boss that it would be very bad if anyone found out about this. And he asked Jaeyoung to calm down a little. After all, the guy has already tried so hard to live correctly that one day he may fall off this path. He should learn flexibility in order to survive in this world. At that moment, he realized that he was at the crossroads of life. If he keeps his mouth shut, then nothing will happen. He will simply close his eyes to what is happening and will live like everyone else, doing his job. But then, for the rest of his life, he will live like a fraudster. A fraud who sacrifices all his principles and virtues to put food on the table. Some time later, Vice President Dent Jong was arrested for embezzling the budget. All the employees had heard before that he wasted tons, and he did not look like such a person. Jong returned everything down to the last cent, and the number above his head immediately disappeared. Is it possible? Could this be so? And really, all these numbers are indicators of their debts. This power was incredible. Suddenly, the scammer himself knew that Jaeyoung was involved in this. Jaeyoung had a rather strange feeling when the vice president looked at him. Suddenly, the boss came to the guy and said that the order came from the very top, and he needed to vacate his desk by the end of the week. Smiling evilly, the boss said that he hated to say that he warned. All the employees thought Jaeyoung was the same guy who ratted out the vice president. They couldn't keep someone like him in the company because he didn't understand the meaning of the words teamwork. Jaeyoung was just a snitch for them, and he didn't suit them. They believed that their work was a delicate matter, and they did not need him. He could rat on anyone who doesn't do things according to the book. An employee must know when to compromise. The hero was a traitor to absolutely everyone. The price of exposing that employee was high. But also, the guy understood that he shouldn't be too surprised. He should just find another job. Now that he knows what the numbers mean, there is one thing that makes him furious. This world is full of scammers. The government is short of funds because of all these thieves. Now the hero understood the meaning of his life. He will become a government official, and will turn those numbers above their heads into zeros. After that, all the dirty corrupt officials will return everything down to the last coin. The world is not fair, it encourages competition and innovation. There are only a few things that are fair in this world, those are law, gravity and taxes. One day Jaeyoung discovered that they had a special ability. He can see how many people have avoided taxes. People had enough money to buy other alcohol and luxury cars, but not to pay taxes. His salary will not change while the tax rate rises. He feels this like no one else. After all, no one gave people the right to think that they are above the law. The hero has no idea where he got this ability, but now Jaeyoung understands what it is for. His mission is to put everyone behind bars. Some time later, the guy was writing an exam. He did it with incredible effort and diligence, because he wanted to pass it, when he suddenly discovered that he had quite a bit of time left. This was the first stage of the written examination for the 7th grade of a civil servant, a tax inspector. For the guy, these questions were incredibly easy. Suddenly, he was asked to place his hands on the table. Anyone who even twitched from that moment on would be disqualified. As soon as the exam ended, Jaeyoung went outside and wanted to check his answers with others. Suddenly, he discovered 16 missed calls, but did not understand who was calling him, because the calls were from an unknown person. The call was made from the emergency room of Seoul Central Hospital. He received this message due to the fact that they could not reach him. Lee was taken to their emergency room, and they asked the guy to come to their hospital immediately. With horror, Jaeyoung realized that his mother was in the emergency room. Some time later, the guy ended up in the hospital. The cost of treatment was 650,000 won. He asked the employee to give him a deferred payment for 6 months. It was too much, he wouldn't be able to pay for it, and he didn't understand what to do. But he still told his mother that he would pay for it himself. When the mother asked how much the treatment cost, he asked her not to worry about it. A few tens of minutes later, he and his mother found themselves near the house. The mother was interested in how her son passed the exam. Jaeyoung thought he passed it. He checked the problem on the internet and it seems that his score will be pretty good. The mother was incredibly happy that her son was capable of this, but it was too early to rejoice, because he still had to pass an interview. In the hero's mailbox, he found a letter from the health insurance company. It was a notice of termination of health insurance for a delinquent payer. The reason was that 6 or more payments had been missed and service had been discontinued. Their insurance was cancelled due to the fact that they could not pay taxes, but his mother just needed her medicine. Sighing heavily, he understood that at the very least, he had to pay for premium insurance for his mother, and on top of all this would be added a hospital bill. When the mother noticed her son looking at something and asked about it, Jaeyoung only said that there were only a couple of bills and he would pay them. The mother immediately asked to show her these accounts, because she did not understand why her son was hiding them, but he asked her not to worry about it. She began to unfold the bill to see what was on it. The woman also sighed heavily and said that she would take care of it herself, and her son should forget about these bills, but he did not understand where she could get so much money from. She could barely cope with her medication. Jaeyoung was against her even thinking about going to work. When the guy said that he would find a job to pay the bills, his mother was also against it because he was too far along in his civil servant exam and couldn't give up right now. The mother was incredibly worried about her son after his brother and father left them. She swore that she would not drag her child to the bottom again. The woman was still as healthy as a horse, so she asked her to forget about it and get ready for her next interview. Jaeyoung told his mom that he would have prepared for his interview, but he had no chance of doing so. Instead he decided to make one call. The hero thought that he would never have to call this number, but he was desperate enough to call the bastard older brother who abandoned his own family. When Jaeyoung called the number, he told his brother that his mother was very sick, but his brother asked him to forget the number and said that he was busy and wanted to hang up. This time everything was very serious, but the brother believed that this woman was always sick, and asked him to paint her funeral in the smallest detail, after which he said goodbye. Indignant to the extreme, Jaeyoung began to shout at his brother, but he asked him to stop squealing, because his mother was not dead yet. The hero didn't care how he treated them, but he couldn't communicate with his mother like that. The brother replied that mother could not even dream of such an obedient son, and began to ask why he could not take care of her in this case. She was now his responsibility. As if a friend, his brother understood why Jaeyoung was calling him and called him a pathetic beggar. Due to the fact that the guy was a beggar, his brother considered him shameless. He used his mother as an excuse to ask his brother for money, but he did not consider that they were a family anymore. This also means that he did not owe him or her not a penny for a woman. If he helps him once, then he will stick to his brother, and you will pull him to the bottom, again, after which he asked him not to call anymore, and hung up. At the hero's cry, even the geese flew into the air in fright. That's why he vowed to always strive for transparency and diversity in his work. By transparency, he meant building trust in government, and diversity meant allowing everyone to be heard. Also, Jae-young had a special way of overcoming difficulties. That is, he is unable to get an interview just because his mother is sick, even though it is the last step towards his dream job. Or the fact that he, as a complete failure, cannot pay for his mother's medicine. He meant to overcome these types of difficulties. To live like everyone else, he must constantly do something different from everyone else. While everyone is drinking and having fun, he is studying. When others are busy with their personal lives, he is working, because once a beggar is always a beggar. To hell with being a civil servant. None of this made any sense. Realizing that trying would not help, he thought that he needed to die. He stood on the edge of the bridge and was about to do something. Far below him was water that flowed with incredible current. Standing over the edge of the abyss, the guy began to get nervous, and afraid of what might happen next. But he did not dare to do this, and walked away from the edge of the bridge, considering himself the most cowardly person in the world, because he could not even die normally. He thought that if he worked harder, it would change everything. As it turned out, it all looked like some kind of damn joke. Hero could not understand whether someone hoping to become a government employee should throw trash in the river. Suddenly, the guy felt something. Someone stopped him. It looked like he was preparing for an interview, and the person asked why he was giving up after passing the written exam. The man who stopped Jae-young wanted to listen to his story. The hero didn't understand why the man stopped him and asked him to get away from him, but the man asked him not to overexert himself, and why don't he tell the whole situation and satisfy his curiosity. According to this book, he studied taxes and almost gave up. This confused the hero, and he replied that until he did this, the man concluded that in this way he was taking out his anger. Jae-young was interested in who this man was. He understood that their meeting was not accidental. He appeared out of nowhere in an expensive suit and watch. And also, the man wanted to find out why the guy was so sad. It was unknown what such a busy person needed from him. Looking at the man, the hero also thought that he probably had a lot of dirty money on his hands. But there was absolutely not a single number above his head. As it turns out, this man is not a tax fraud. If the guy doesn't say anything now, the man will move on, and the guy said that he did everything he could and was just trying to live a normal life. The wise man asked what was unfair to his opinion. The guy replied that everything, nothing goes as it should. He never asked for much, but just wanted to live as usual, like everyone else. For this he spent most of his life working until exhaustion. He needed to escape from this hell. Jae-young wanted the same life as everyone else, with the usual ups and downs. And also, he wanted to be adequately rewarded for all the work he did, that's all. Because of this, the man didn't understand whether that's why he thought the world was unfair. If so, then he was a little disappointed. The hero knew how it sounded, but was sure that everything could have been much worse. But, nevertheless, given all the injustice of this world, is it really such a big crime to report a criminal for waste of the budget? The unknown person was extremely intrigued and asked to tell us more. Jae-young tearfully started screaming that he didn't think he was better than anyone and just wanted to live with a clear conscience, so he reported on their vice president and then got fired. But now it didn't matter anymore. It was his fault that he was born with such shitty luck. And the guy didn't understand who even believed that the law brings justice to this world. According to him, the man immediately realized that this is why he wants to become an official. It was really so. It seemed to the guy that this was the only way out. For people like him who have nothing, this is the only way to fight these thieves with their heads held high. The unknown person realized that the injustice that Jae-young was talking about could disappear along with the caught criminals. And then, the man had one last question for the guy. He wanted the hero to imagine that he had indeed become a reputable collector, and learned about a superior person who had committed tax fraud. If he closes his eyes, no one will know about it. And if he understood him correctly, then the guy was fired from his previous job because he reported to the manager. The unknown person continued to look at the guy with interest and asked if he would do this again. But the hero knew that there was such an expression. the blade of justice is blind. It didn't matter who it was, Jae-young would report him without a second thought. The man agreed with him and took something out of his wallet. And I admired how intriguing this young man was. After which, he said that the guy needs to get real experience. Jae-young's eyes immediately lit up as he wondered if he really had what it took to become the blade of justice he was talking about. Having become interested, the unknown person was terribly curious about where they would meet next time, when he would overcome these temporary difficulties. He wanted to see how much the hero is a man of his word, and gave him the phone number of a familiar accounting office, and would like Jae-young to gain experience there. And his number was below. If the guy needed help in the future, he could call him. The unknown person agreed to help only once, and the guy did not understand why he was the one, because he was sure that no one would help a rogue like him. But he was able to get the man to show him that there was such a thing as support in this world. Gratitude knew no bounds. The guy bowed and said that he would pay one day, but the man did not expect anything in return, because it was a gesture of goodwill. However, the hero had one more small question. He wondered if this was some kind of financial pyramid. These words amused the man incredibly, and he began to laugh loudly. But it was all right. He liked the guy's suspiciousness, and he was not at all obliged to accept his help. And he asked me to remember what he said after he became an official. Immediately after this, the unknown person immediately left. The blade of justice is blind. It sounded like this blade would be just in what it cuts. But because it is blind, it can easily hurt whoever wields it. They should meet again when Jae-young learns his lesson. 2 months flew by incredibly quickly. Jae-young listened to lectures in the morning. During the day I went to work in the office. The work was quite simple, so he did not need to concentrate too much, and this allowed him to listen to what was happening around him. He heard literally everything. Every time he made copies or grabbed coffee, he listened. And finally, came the last question. What kind of civil servant does Jae-young want to be? The hero wanted to become a defender of honest taxpayers. And the dispenser of justice over those who evade payment is the type of official he aspired to. Some time later the guy returned home to his mother. As soon as she entered the apartment, the guy started crying and said that he had finally passed. The woman was incredibly happy, because her boy had finally paid off all his work. She prayed with all her might for him. The guy proudly said that it was all thanks to his mother. Jae-young scored well during his probationary period, earning him a place in Seoul. Sometimes he felt as if someone was watching over him on days like these. And he thought about the man he met on the bridge then, maybe because he was the one keeping an eye on him, and the guy was going to catch all these thieving swindlers with his bare hands. Korea's future looks blindingly bright because of the number of minors earning rental income equal to 2,400 people. In other words, middle-class students receive the same as large landowners. But in fact, it is their parents who bypass the payment system. These children were not at all like 12-year-old businessmen. It was their parents who were using a closed loop to minimize tax. Until, of course, the CEO decides to go back to school to brush up on his addition and subtraction skills. But what he believed most of all, those numbers flashing before his eyes, told him that this was tax evasion. The hero worked in the income tax department, and he was waiting for Mr. Park, to whom he was going to report something. He lent the business 108 million won a year to rent out retail space, but the owner is only 12 years old, and the income level is only 39%, which means that 65 million allegedly goes to expenses. The guy wanted to get the master's permission to start a tax investigation. With a sneer, the gentleman didn't understand why Jae-young was so sure of this. A rental business that brings in 100 million won a year, but its owner is only 12 years old, but the gentleman didn't seem to want to hear him. This was incredibly suspicious, while the rate of return was 39%, which meant 65 million won a year was spent on expenses. Suddenly, the master ordered him to leave them and forget about the investigation. Even though the owner was a minor, this was probably a way to evade paying taxes. The same man again told him to forget. After all, this was not his business. This is the responsibility of the tax department. The guy worked here for only 2 months, and the gentleman was interested in whether he knew how to read financial reports. The hero was at a loss, but they ordered him with all their might to leave the arrogant people who did not pay taxes. He was depressed, but a girl suddenly approached him and asked him to give her a minute. It was clear that she was nervous, and the girl asked about the Imsan Mall. After which, she also said that he should just leave this matter. Everyone knew about it. The manager and head of the department were friends with the owners. The lady praised the guy for working so hard to get the job, but it wasn't worth it. In addition, the head of the department will soon retire. Suddenly, the guy remembered the words of his past boss, how he said that the guy would fall straight to the bottom. The hero couldn't believe it at all, and he started shouting that this is not why he became a civil servant. This money belongs to the residents of the country. He asked why they let these people steal their money like they were bandits. Some people should obey the law while others simply bypass it. This is wrong. Because of the guy's scream, the workers began to whisper among themselves, and wanted to find out how long the guy had been working here, and who his boss was. Suddenly, the boss began to shout loudly, because he had no right to disclose this to everyone. If he wanted to continue, he could imitate from here right now, the boss told him, and the girl added that he should ask for forgiveness. Due to injustice, theft and incompetence of the master, Jae-young up and left, because a grown man should know his place in the world. When he came out, he was completely uncomfortable. It was disgusting how they could call themselves officials after something like this. Taking a deep breath, he thought he could do it. And he started making phone calls. After all, he remembered the very words of the man that he could help him only once. As soon as the guy got through to the mysterious man, he immediately asked how much he could help him. The man was immediately interested in how exactly he could help, and he would tell you what could and could not be arranged. Jae-young immediately spoke about the building, the owner of which is a 12-year-old, the real owner is the CEO of the Imsun company, Jong-hak Im. It seems that his boss and the managing department of the tax service department are on good terms with him. The man immediately asked what was required of him. The heroes were going to arrest the thieves and make them pay in full, and he wants to involve all possible means. The stranger again reminded him that this was his only chance to get help and asked if he really wanted to use it that way. Indignantly, the guy shouted that this was really so, and why ask this at all? The man was amused by this and Jae-young said that he would deal with these bastards. He chose this job because he wanted to catch scoundrels like them. This was something new for the man, and he agreed to help. From now on and forever, the man said that no one would stand in his way. He immediately started making phone calls. He called from the Bomson tax office in Seoul, from the revenue department, and wanted to talk to a tax accountant. Suddenly, the boss started screaming furiously, wondering what kind of asshole was calling the tax accounting department. The boss shouted for everyone to answer, and the guy admitted that it was him. Confused, boss began to ask what he told them. Suddenly, the guy told him that he was working and asked him not to disturb him. The boss cursed himself for hiring this damn child. All the employees asked Inspector Jae-young to immediately apologize to the boss. Suddenly, someone else entered the office and shouted that lunch was more than an hour ago. He was interested in why they were all not at work. Department head Kim saw him and was confused. It was the director of the Beomsun tax office, Sung-won Hyo, and also the head of the department, Jae-hyun Kim. The director asked not to pay attention to him and go back to work. The director heard the swearing and wondered what was going on. The man wanted to talk to the gentleman, and with the head of the department, Kim. Suddenly, he also turned to Inspector Jae-young. The guy turned around and said that it was really him. With incredible politeness, the director said that he hoped that he would allow him to retire peacefully. No one understood why the director said that. All the employees were perplexed. They did not understand why the director wanted to leave peacefully, and what had Inspector Jae-young to do with it. Jae-young himself answered the director that if he has nothing to hide as a civil servant, then why not? The older man was interested in this, because it was an interesting condition. At least everything is not as neglected for him as for these two. The men did not understand what the director wanted to say by this. After which, he ordered them to follow him. The men were dumbfounded, and the director shouted again, whether he expressed himself unclearly. The shocked men did not understand what to do, and blindly followed the director. The door to the office closed, and absolutely all the workers were confused after that. Each of them looked at Jae-young, and did not understand at all what was going on. And the hero continued to work as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, someone else was walking to the company office. The man thought that perhaps the new employee had just made a mistake, but he is a tax accountant with 12 years of experience. It's just a small problem that needs to be taken care of. The unknown person entered his beloved officials and greeted them. Suddenly, he saw two men who were sitting waiting for something terrible to happen. The man also began to get nervous and asked them if an order had been received to recheck income. This was not true. It was even worse. No one could believe that this was happening right before they left. When he found out everything, he was shocked, because he was just a freshman, and only in the 7th grade. it was unknown how things could get out of control. There were great forces behind him, and if they had only known in advance, they would not have behaved this way. Jaeyoung went directly to the prosecutor's office. The director gave them a direct order. He said to let the boy do whatever he wants. Everything really got out of control. After all, the general director of the main headquarters personally gave the decree. They read the letter that was sent in great detail. Meanwhile, the hero continued to do his work, and told one of the people that their meeting was over. Due to the fact that the man had nothing more to add, he was free, and the guy thanked him for his cooperation. The excited man turned again and asked if he was sure he was free. Jaeyoung answered in the affirmative and asked to take care of himself. This was the first case of embezzlement from a hero. Just like the man said, no one can stop him. Suddenly, for some reason he became agitated, remembering the words of the boss, how he said that he would lose his temper. Today everything went smoothly, but will it be the same tomorrow? Suddenly, the same man in his car honked at him. The guy was embarrassed, but the man offered him dinner, and they immediately went in his car to eat. In bewilderment, Jaeyoung did not understand what he had done to deserve such mercy, and the man simply wanted to surprise him. In fact, he is quite a busy person, but he was still waiting there. The hero did not understand why he should go through all these difficulties, and also wanted to find out where they were going. The man just laughed, because he had helped the guy twice already, and wanted him to trust him. When they arrived, the hero was incredibly surprised. After all, he saw sashimi with cold shavings, and never thought that he would see them in person. The mysterious man exclaimed that the guy should enjoy himself, because he deserved it, and this is just the beginning, more to come. Having thanked him, he thought about the fact that there was already plenty of everything on the table. Was there really something else? With incredible pleasure, he continued to eat very tasty food. Yes, and a person has complete freedom of action and you will find out what he really is like. This is the theory of the male boss. Despite this, Jaeyoung could become rich or famous, but he remained true to his principles. After all, as they said, as you start, so you go. Besides, there is nothing free in this world. This made the wise man laugh. For such a cautious man, the guy called him pretty soon. Jaeyoung was sure that he was not an ordinary person. The fact that he supported him so suddenly meant that he had to live up to expectations. And it got so bad that he needed help. The man was happy, because he was right about the guy. His name was Songyun Lee, and he is the head of the tax department at the Samson Tax Service. Jaeyoung was shocked by this. He was incredibly surprised that this man worked in the tax service. The Samson office is on par with Cheocho, Yeksam, Banpo, and Gangnam, the most famous offices in the world. He is probably a very influential person, but still, how could the head of the department make a call to the director? Suddenly, someone else started walking to join the dinner. The guy was even more shocked, because he didn't know who he would see next. The new guest was the general director, but there are no general directors in tax offices, which means he is responsible for the entire region. Is he really from the main department? The CEO said that there is no need to get up. The one who fawns over his own beginning should not worry in front of some CEO. Continuing to feel awkward, he could not stop thinking that this was some kind of trap. Suddenly, Songyun Lee came out. The CEO didn't mind. After all, they should meet outside. The hero continued to experience incredible awkwardness. And I thought about what to tell him now. The man asked the young man if he could ask him for a drink. The guy immediately agreed and began to fulfill the wishes of the general director. And he kindly poured it for him. Trembling with fear, he continued to pour, when suddenly the director turned to him. Not knowing at all what to expect, he waited for what the CEO would say. Unexpectedly, the man wanted to get straight to the point, because he wanted Jaeyoung to become his blade. The hero clearly did not expect this, and again asked if it was a blade. The man's name was Chi-ho Min. He is the general director of the Tax Research Bureau, and he certainly did not insist on accepting his offer. Confused, the young man asked what the catch was. But there was no catch, and Chi-ho Min was not going to force the guy. The balanced guy immediately asked if the director had any idea who he was. Chi-ho Min knew that Jaeyoung was a government employee who wanted to catch tax fraudsters. And that's all he needs from him, to continue to pursue such people. A bit of an oversimplification, but he was right, and still, if he gives him that kind of power, there will always be a possibility that he would start investigating someone in their own department. The director laughed. He cannot influence this. After all, it is his decision and naturally the hero can refuse. Jae-young continued to look the director straight in the eye. A hero would be glad to wield such a blade. As long as there is a guarantee that he can use it the way he wants, the director agreed, and the guy could stay in the Beamson office for now, but if he agreed, he could move to the Samson office next year. Samson is his chance, it doesn't matter who it is, he'll just have to go after the tax avoiders. Some time later, events continue to occur at the Beamson tax office. All the workers looked excitedly as Jae-young returned. They whispered to each other that he was back, and completely shameless. Well, as if nothing had happened, the guy wished everyone good morning. He thought about the fact that he might actually become an office pariah at 30. In fact, a beautiful novel is coming out, he thought he would just continue working. Two new people he met yesterday, Samson Tax Service Department Head, Songkyun Lee, and the Director General of the Research Bureau, Chi-ho Min. Any official of his level would kill to have such connections, but it doesn't seem to affect anything now. Suddenly, Department Head Kim approached him, the guy greeted him, and he asked him to stop behaving like that. But the hero didn't quite understand what was going on. The man started screaming furiously, calling the guy an asshole, because Jae-young felt so important. Suddenly, another man entered the office and asked what was going on here. It was the department head of the tax service department, Seong-go Ham, and he realized that it was Jae-hyun Kim, the disgrace of the Beamson office. It was a miracle that he had not yet been fired. Kim So started shouting angrily and asked him not to get involved in this. But Sun-ho Ham was not so simple, and pointed out to Kim that he didn't know that he had ruined their reputation as government officials, and how about thinking before you yell. The angry man immediately began to walk away, and Sun-ho Ham noticed that this was his chance to get lost. Sun-go Ham immediately approached Jae-young and asked if he had a minute. This should only take a minute and they were about to head out to the break room. Suddenly, Sun-go Ham handed Jae-young a grape lollipop, his favorite. The hero clearly did not expect this, and thanked him. Sun-ho Ham did not like formalities. He heard that the hero wanted to send something to his department. It was true, Jae-young suspected that the owner of the shopping center, Im Seong, was guilty of tax evasion. In fact, the CEO is a 12-year-old child, and according to the financial history, the building and location cost a total of 1.5 billion won. There was no chance that everything belonged to her, the director wondered, in which case, someone could use the loop to donate buildings and land. Using it to make money is exactly what it looked like. Sun-ho Ham agreed and began to take something out of his pocket so that the guy would look at it. This was the story of the finances of Imsan Mall. The debt amounted to 1.4 billion, of which 1.3 billion were loans. And they borrowed 1.3 billion, added 200 million in cash, and bought the place by creation for 1.5 billion. From that moment on, they knew where the money was coming from. The director was in anticipation, and the guy thought that he had missed something. Lost in thought, the guy thought it was from his parents. But this was not so, the loan was issued by the bank. They took out a secured loan against their parents' shopping center, and then bought their parents' shopping center for the same money. Bingo, Jae-young got it right. These dirty ferrets must pay for this. It's time for them to pay for trying to defraud the National Tax Service. Well, there was no hurry, because there was still a burdensome gift. This was the transfer of absolutely everything to the new owner, along with debts. If they give 1.5 billion, then it should be subject to gift tax. Considering that gift debt is pretty healthy, the gift recipient ends up with a bunch of pesky debt. But using a gift is completely different if you take a loan from a bank and transfer the debt to the recipient of the gift. This is called a transfer, which means much less to pay. And this is absolutely legal, but the director asked the hero not to worry, because there was one way, and he would show it to him. But for this, the guy will have to work a little. Sun-go Ham continued to praise Inspector Jae-young. He is truly something. Who would have thought that he would refuse his help and try to find an opportunity on his own? The director was waiting for the guy at the entrance. He had an incredibly confident gait, someone could even confuse him with a veteran of his business. The guy got the point and they had a chance. The scheme was to pass money on to their children, minimizing taxes owed as much as possible. But, according to the report, 1.3 billion won should be returned to the bank. In theory, the child should return this money, but in reality, naturally, the parents, and there should also be an explanation of who exactly returned the money. The man was incredibly pleased, and he was interested in what else he had learned. The guy was a little confused and didn't know what else to add. A moment later, they were already there. The two of them ended up near Imsan Corp. The director gave the guy the bank book of this general child. The organization foresaw this. This statement is not at all suspicious, because they have always used the services of a tax accountant. Also, there was an account for transactions from the documents. This was a tax notice. Jae-young always needs ironclad proof, after which they were going to enter the corporation. They opened the door and greeted everyone on behalf of the Beomsun tax office. Jae-young hoped that they had already prepared their dirty money. Everyone was horrified, because they didn't understand what it all meant. The leaders did not understand how a subordinate dared to talk to them like that, but Jae-young was unperturbed, because he had all the evidence. For criminals, they too often flaunt their status as government officials. They were going to tear the guy to pieces with their bare hands. One of the men saw that this was the same problem kid he had heard so much about. Sungo Ham joked about how he's not a problem kid, and maybe it's worth focusing on a small problem in the office. The man asked the boy to listen here. If you were him, he would think twice before speaking. With the same equanimity, the guy introduced himself, and he will think and talk as many times as necessary. They immediately provided documents confirming tax evasion. Disgusted, the man asked not to take up his time. In that case, Jae-young will be forced to give this little Miss Yeji. I wonder if her last school bell has rung. The man seemed to go wild. He wanted to look at the documents, but he no longer wanted them to pronounce his daughter's name with their dirty mouths. The old man was outraged to the extreme when he saw the debt of 500 million won. It was simply ridiculous. Indeed, he expected to hear much more. This was natural, because his debt exceeds a whole billion won. And he began to make excuses that it was not a gift, it was a transfer, and he paid tax on the transfer. A transfer involves receiving something in return, and in his case, it is certified as a transfer in which he already pays tax. The old man agreed. His daughter repays the debt with the money she receives from the shopping center. Jae-young immediately asked if the old man was sure that he was not paying for her. The old man immediately asked for proof. But the hero saw a bank statement from the business owner. The actual loan repayment amount seems to be leaving the account. It is a loan of 3 billion won for 30 years, that's 42 million per year. If the annual profit of a shopping center is 108 million, isn't it natural that the net profit is 42 million? Everyone had the feeling that this guy was not a government employee, but a special tax agent. And he's not done yet. That's why he brought this. The document they saw filled them with incredible horror. It was an extract from the book of his daughter's second bank account. Permanent deposit of 5 million per month, which equals 42 million per year. How nice of him to give his daughter an employee's salary when he had billions of dollars in loans. That's where he poured all the money so that he could go to the bank later. The guy thinks they're done checking his homework, and he will let the old man explain himself. The boss immediately started shouting that why the hell did the old guy transfer money directly to her account without even consulting them, because he had two experts on hand to help. Watching this, Sun Ho Ham realized that it had been done perfectly. The thieves began to quarrel among themselves. They were ready to strangle each other. Looking at them, Jae-young understood that they would have no explanation, and then he assessed taxes in accordance with the confirmed evidence. And he hopes for their accurate and timely payment. It was a clear victory. The elderly man smiled, because he thought that the guy had set up a one-man show, and he can stuff his timely payment deeper into himself. He simply underestimated him and asked him to wait. As if nothing had happened, the man called Chief Guy and asked him how he was doing. He was calling a worker from the Beomsun police station, and the real reason he was calling was because he is close to Section Chief Kim and Manager Park from the Income Tax Department. Their capabilities were quite limited. Suddenly, the same police station employee said that he had the wrong number. The arrogant tax evaders did not understand what was happening and what had happened. Jae-young also received a message on his mobile phone. It was written by Section Chief Sungkyun Lee, and indicated that an investigator from the prosecutor's office stopped at the Beomsun tax office this evening. This is what it's like to have a big force on your side. With incredible pleasure they decided to continue. It looked as if the old man's world had been shattered into pieces. Jae-young asked to let his daughter know that they expect her to pay on time. He wanted to bribe and was going to pay 500 million won. The guy immediately took the envelope. The old man thought that this was all that was needed. Why go back to the bottom, and why all this fuss? Suddenly, Jae-young tore up a check for 500 million won with his own hands. After all, if he has that kind of money, then he should use it to pay taxes. Incredibly, the man thought he was simply crazy. And also, Imsun Corp. will soon become the subject of a tax investigation, and he also advises them to prepare an explanation for the prosecutor general. It was real hopelessness. The elderly man seemed to die from his words. Some time later, events continued to occur in the tax administration. Someone was collecting people's things in the office. These were the same violators who believed that this was their first crime and asked not to touch their things. Their hands were tied and they continued to shout that they could walk on their own. Government officials were arrested for helping to commit tax fraud. It was a real shame. Suddenly, the director approached the guy and wanted to talk to him. And immediately, as soon as they were in the director's office, he handed him a lollipop stuffed with red ginseng. Everyone here seems to love candy, and the director said Jae-young did a great job. The head of the department was also here, and he was also surprised. If he didn't know anything about Jae-young, he would have mistaken him for a veteran with 10 years of experience. Department head Jae-hyun Kim had a good relationship with Imsun Corp as soon as he arrived here, but no one could lay a finger on him because of his connections. No one could believe how many other inspectors he had driven out, but the guy took good care of him and the park manager. The hero was embarrassed when they began to praise him. But there are still many people like them here, so department head Ham and the director thought it through carefully, and would like to join Jae-young's connections and clean out the office once and for all. The guy was flattered, but he really wasn't anyone special. His father died and his mother was seriously ill. He had to tear out this place with teeth and claws. And based on everything he had been through, there was no chance that he would become a criminal civil servant. This is what made him special. It's very hard to fight for what's right, but he does it anyway. He should continue to do as he wishes, and the men ensured that no one would stand in his way. Needless to say how messy things will get. The director suggested that it was his turn to show what he was capable of and asked him to tell him in which department it would be easiest for him to do the job. Some time later, someone looked at the hero with great pressure. After all, he became a newcomer who entered the investigative department. The one who looked at him oppressively called himself Myung-hyun Kim, and he was an investigator. The hero didn't know if he could be trusted. But right now, he planned to find out. After checking, it turned out that the man was clean. After which, the investigator asked to follow him. Jae-young had the opportunity to watch the girl report on her tax evasion. Hero was amazed that the man had already taken him into the business, without any preparation. The girl's identity would be protected, and he wanted to start recording. The lady agreed, but was incredibly nervous. The recording began and they began. Surely this is for the best. This is really a chance for Jae-young. The lady thought that the owner of their grocery store was evading taxes, and the investigator asked why she thought so. He charged full price for card payments and gave a discount for cash payments, but that was completely normal. The investigator was interested in whether this was something personal. If not, then they would naturally investigate it. Sometimes people may report someone just to take revenge, but whatever the reason, they will definitely investigate everything thoroughly. Because this is their direct responsibility. After which the woman was asked how many employees there were in their store. There were about 12 or 15. Despite all this, he never paid them on time. The investigator suggested that the owner was probably short of cash, but the woman saw him keeping it in his safe. The woman had proof, because she took a photo of them on her phone. This photo was of the store owner, and in his safe there was a lot of cash and gold bars. Apparently, he shouldn't have any problems paying salaries to his employees. The woman could not take any more photos, because she was afraid that she would be noticed. But there was one thing, most clients bring accounting reports with them as evidence, but she seems not entirely sure. Their task is to figure everything out for sure. The investigator once again thanked the woman for her appeal. After which, they left the room. The man immediately asked if Jae-young understood everything. He answered in the affirmative, but did not understand what would happen now. The investigator asked not to share the details of his case with colleagues. He will be the only one who monitors everything at once. The hero immediately understood everything. They usually work in pairs, but they don't have enough hands, and the guy will have to do it alone. On his first day without preparation, he had to go to the right address and investigate the case. Some time later, the hero found himself at the right address. As soon as he was in the store, he heard people talking about many discounts. Bananas cost 2,000 won per bunch, kiwis cost 8,000 won per kilogram. The director himself was incredibly angry and shouted at customers who decided to touch the product. Suddenly, some boy decided to ask the director why paying by card is more expensive. The director began to frantically shout that paying by card is always more expensive, and there is nothing strange about that. The price difference was much larger than Jae-young expected, the cash price was too low. One of the grandmothers was outraged. She wasn't going to take it anymore. They couldn't cut prices by 101 every day if they didn't want their business to fail. But the director angrily started shouting at the woman to run away from the store and not come here to whine because her sales were bad. This woman must have been from another store. Because of its prices it must be difficult to compete. Something doesn't add up. How can he earn so much by selling at such prices, and at the same time he is heavily in debt? It's good that Jae-young has enough freedom of action. Now we need to develop a strategy. The guy has a video about how much he owes in taxes, but he has no proof yet. It was unknown why the head of the department decided that he was evading taxes. First of all, he needed evidence, and it seemed that there was a long way to go. Suddenly, someone called the guy on the phone. Suddenly, the unknown person said that he saw him and let him stay there. Immediately someone started approaching him on a bicycle. His name was Manhwa Wang. He was a level 8 employee in the investigation department. The head of the department, Myung-yun, contacted him and said that they needed to go. Jae-young was incredibly surprised because he was surprised that the guy came on a bicycle. This happened because he simply forgot his car keys, and they promised to return him to the office safely. After which, they began to ride a bicycle to the office together. The hero immediately remembered the financial report. This income denunciation was also quite interesting. The annual discount on the card was 100 million won, and on cash only 3 million. The owner practically forced customers to pay cash, so this is a lie. This was a great first thing for the guy. He was good at it, and the store owner had no doubt underreporting his income. At that moment, Jae-young realized that the greedy swindler had been caught. It sounded like he had unearthed something worthwhile, and they moved forward with a plan of action. Meanwhile, the store owner was counting the money. Suddenly, someone knocked on his door. That same store employee came into the boss's office because she wanted to discuss her salary. The boss was indignant, because he gave her money for last month, but he said that in 3 months he would start paying the minimum wage. Having calmed down a little, he asked if the girl's trial period had ended. Suddenly he remembered that the girl 2 months ago went home early because of chills. He pointed his finger at her, because that day they had transportation. It was real hell. This was true. But on that day they sold out most of the products and there were no more buyers. The pathetic boss didn't want to listen to this, because he believed that the girl thought that they could just close the store because there were no customers around. He didn't like the girl's attitude towards work, and he fired her. Very upset, the girl wanted to at least get paid for the work that she had already done, but he slammed his fist on the table and shouted that with her work, she was lucky that he was paying her anything. And he ordered her to leave, after which she slammed the door behind her. Suddenly, someone turned to the girl and asked if this was the office of the store owner. They came here to conduct a tax investigation. There was also another girl with them, named Inspector Tor Labor. The girl seemed to be out of her mind and fell to the floor. Jae-young asked if this was the boss's office, and the inspector girl extended her hand and told her to get up. Seeing the inspectors, the director was indignant because they came without prior notice. If there is a risk of destruction of evidence, an investigation may be conducted without prior notice. The insolent scoundrel began shouting incredibly loudly that he was not a criminal. Jae-young looked at him and said that they would look into it, and introduced himself. He is from the first investigation department of the Beomsun Tax Service, Shin Jae-hyun, and asks to cooperate with the investigation. The boss's labor cost was 96 million won, but he didn't disclose it. If the boss reports all this, he will die of hunger. Its annual sales are only 300 million won. But also, Jae-young asked if he heard anything about the corresponding labor cost. You need to pay up to 30 or 40% of sales, and he pays 32% if the labor cost is 96 million won. The director laughed and said that he said there was no problem here. However, when Jae-young looked at the labor cost reports, it said 4 employees, but it seems that this kind of work would require at least 5. Wary, they immediately asked the boss if they really only had 4 people working in their store. The angry man shouted that they shouldn't care how many people work in his store. Jae-young asked not to lie to him, because he saw that there were at least 10 employees working in his store. If the sales volume is 300 million won, then the simple estimated labor cost is 240,000 won. If everything is correct, then the boss is at a big disadvantage, and Jae-young wanted to know where he was getting his living expenses from then. Colleagues were amazed, because the guy took into account absolutely everything. it was quite interesting. And in cash they received 3% of sales, so that's only 9 million won. It was too big a difference between paying by card and cash. The boss immediately began to make excuses that now most people use card payments, but in fact, this can easily be verified by CCTV cameras. Jae-young also saw that only 1 in 10 people paid with a card. Based on this, real sales are more than 10 times. Again the man made an excuse that in fact it was only twice, but then it turns out that if you double the amount of the card, it will be 600 million, which means the total annual sales volume is 900 million. But that was not all. There are also problems with Social Security for employees. No purchase of private insurance, no notification of daily employment, no execution of an employment contract, violation of the minimum wage. The cost of the work was also not paid, and there were no pension payments either. And it won't end until he simply pays the overdue money. It was a total knockout for the boss. This is how Jae-young was able to refute the man's dirty deeds. Some time later, events continued in the office. Colleagues discussed that the newcomer ended up in the investigative department in his first year. Everyone was incredibly interested in how he showed himself. Initially, the guy didn't even know what to answer, because he was amazed. Suddenly, Jae-young entered the office. All the workers immediately clung to him. They heard that he had sorted out the yen market. This was surprising to them, and they also wanted to understand how he came to the investigation department. Jae-young came here after dealing with the head of the income tax department and his boss. The guy again amazed everyone, because he dealt with those two psychos. Feeling awkward, the guy admitted that this was indeed the case. It was truly a good job. They talked so much about government officials. Their colleagues also wanted to know if there would be any reward for it this time. There will really be a reward, because the boss wants to hold a corporate event or something like that. Everyone was just happy and immediately ran to the corporate party. The boss even heard noise from the office when he was sitting in his office and was a little surprised. Towards evening, events continued to occur in the cafe where the corporate party was taking place. The workers drank sake together for the Beamson investigation department. They had not gathered like this for a long time, and the main thing was that after this they could all get home. Colleagues were incredibly interested in where this newcomer came from, because they had not had such employees for a long time. They also wanted to know how Jae-hyun's investigation department was doing. Suddenly, Secretary Hwang Min-woo came in. He approached the cafe employee and asked how much money was paid for this table. The total payment was 460,000 won. This was unexpected for everyone, because they saw how the secretary paid for them. Instantly they all started running towards them and shouting what he was doing here. Hwang Min remembered that if he paid with a card, the record would remain, and then he decided to pay in cash. The workers seemed to go wild. They did not want to answer under the law on improper extortion and bribery. Jae-young immediately thought that he had done this on purpose, and he and his colleague concluded that he needed to be followed. After this situation, the man immediately wanted to introduce himself, and he said that his name was Lee Bong-han. He was a tax accountant at the main office. The guy could not shake the feeling that he had seen this man somewhere. It was the same tax accountant who kicked him out of the company. The next day, events continued to occur in the office. Jae-young continued to be interested in tax agent Lee Bong-han, and I didn't understand how he was still working in Tail. The hero came to Tail's enterprise immediately after the army to work as a part-time logistician. It's a wholesale and retail company that mainly sells kitchen utensils. It's been a long time since he heard that name, and I remembered the moment when I worked there. Jae-young began to remember how he was forgiven for carrying many types of cargo. It was incredibly heavy. At his last job, they even asked him if he was preparing for some kind of exam, but the guy replied that he had nothing to prepare for. In this case, the man asked to help him. He still had nothing to do, but needed to earn money. He brought him to a new job, and previously told the director about the guy. Jae-young promised to work incredibly hard. That same director saw that the guy was responsible for his work and wanted to see him at work as soon as possible. At first it seemed to the hero that everything was fine, because at that moment he did not understand how rotten everything was. Suddenly, the hero felt that he could not concentrate. He felt bad because he was doing this for the first time, because usually at such moments he saw a person who had done something. Do they really have another case of tax evasion, even after dismissing employees? There were two options: or the hero did not understand something, or they continue in the same vein. The worker approached the employee and asked why he wasn't eating, but the guy didn't want to do this, because he was passionate about work. In this case, his colleague would eat his breakfast, and Jae-young needed to continue working. He had to fight Tails Enterprise. His colleague did not understand why this was happening all of a sudden. Suddenly, the hero remembered the words of his boss, who was talking about short-term shareholder bonds. This is a kind of advance payment provided to the shareholder, managers and employees. The bond of Tails Enterprise was more than 1 billion won, and the guy believed that they needed to do their own careful calculation. The boss agreed with him, because perhaps they would find information there about financial benefits upon retirement. And then the advance payment, although the company used it, there is no information about this anywhere. The guy needed to check this, and remember one thing, the people are not their enemy, and they need to avoid self-interest and act in accordance with laws and principles. Jae-young immediately called Tail's office and introduced the Beamson tax office. The Tail company representative was immediately interested in what issue they were calling about. The heroes needed information about bonuses and permissions from the board of directors. A company employee asked to give him 5 minutes to search for information. The employee who received the call did not have the appropriate permission, and he wanted to connect the hero with the director. Memories immediately came flooding back to Jae-young, because it was the same director who fired him. Park In-chul, chief director. After which, the guy told him that he would like to ask permission from the bonus board of directors. The director immediately asked who was calling. The hero introduced himself as being from the first investigation department of the Beamson tax service, Shin Jae-hyun. The chief director was incredibly amazed that such a person was calling him. He grinned and told the guy that he had made such a career. But the guy told him that he couldn't have private conversations because he was at work right now, and asked the director if he could give him all the information by fax. He gave the director 10 minutes to talk about everything. The director was immediately indignant, because he wanted to know why Jae-young needed all this. But after this question, the guy only gave him 5 minutes. The man immediately asked if he should go overboard. Quite calmly, the hero asked him how many more times he needed to repeat and asked him to provide all the information within 5 minutes. The incredibly angry director called Jae-young a creature. Suddenly, a colleague approached the guy, and he asked whether it was necessary to put so much pressure on him. And the guy was carefully watching the time at this time. Everything was in order, and he turned to the secretary exactly 5 minutes later. 5 minutes passed, still no data. The director answered the phone again. In an incredibly angry tone, he asked Jae-young if he had drunk the brave water. The heroes continued to be unperturbed. After all, he was just doing his job, and there was no need for him to be rude. He asked to send the data on the fact, but the man didn't want to, so this is the end. The director was incredibly shocked. As of today, his company will be issued a notice of tax audit and there is no longer any need to send a fax. Without finding words, the director again called the hero a bastard. As if nothing had happened, the guy hung up, because he didn't want to listen to this nonsense. The colleague was amazed. He had never seen anyone talk like that on the phone, and he asked if he really thought you could dig something up. The answer was yes, and the chance was great. More precisely, Jae-young is 100% sure. Meanwhile, events continued to occur at the Tail Enterprise headquarters. The chief director was incredibly nervous. They had recently undergone a tax audit, and he did not understand what was going on. The fact was that the tax inspector had worked with them before. The manager knew that there would be problems with this bastard. It was unknown what the director and the general secretary thought. The secretary kindly told the manager that they would not solve the problem this way, and everyone needed to calm down. So, the investigative department, they say, they specialize in complex things. The head of the investigation department is especially picky now. His name is Kim Myung-jung. He is very cold-blooded. And the investigator brought charges because of that same traitor. The manager thought the guy wanted revenge because he got fired. Now, thanks to Director Park, they are in trouble again. But if you think about it, it wasn't so bad. They would force him to take their side by any means. The chief director wanted the matter to be left to him, and he wanted to negotiate. The manager hoped that the director would not let him down. Meanwhile, Jae-young was heading somewhere. Suddenly, some girl recognized him, and she immediately came up and greeted him. It was Kim Joo-hee. None of them thought that they could meet here. They were interested in each other and what successes they had achieved. The girl had things like that right now, but she noticed that the guy had found a job, and it looked like he was heading there. It was true, the girl was happy. She thought it would be difficult for him to find a job after he left. It's hard to find a job when you give away all the information about your company to someone. Jae-young immediately asked what she was talking about, an internal data leak. or what she meant. Director Park told her that the guy gave all the data to their competitor. But Jae-young would never do such a thing, and it was unknown why he said such a thing. The girl also thought that it was not so, because an innocent person like him could not do such a thing, but people in the company think he did something bad. After all, no one tells the truth about him. Therefore, there were many rumors about him, and now he bears the mark of a traitor. After some time, Shin Jae-hyun arrived at the enterprise. All the employees called him a traitor. The atmosphere here was terrible. The colleague did not understand why everyone was looking at them like that. He had the mark of a traitor on him. Absolutely everyone considered him an ungrateful idiot, unscrupulous, and did not understand how he could come here. But there was no need to worry about that, because they need to do their job. The lady he met at the metro also didn't understand why he was there. The hero was unperturbed and continued to move forward. He was met by another man whom he had seen recently at a diner. His name was Lee Bong-han. He is a tax accountant, and he invited him to his office. The 18th paragraph talked about the bonus. If they invest money, then 10% of the profit is paid as a special contribution. And they had to bring a copy of the register and minutes of the general meeting of shareholders. The preparation took a little time because they were busy, but everything was clean. It was clear that the document was signed hastily. Of course, the company spent a little private money, but for this they paid the appropriate tax. They do everything according to the laws. The manager really wanted to meet Jae-young, and the guy immediately concluded that he wanted to bribe him. The colleague did not understand why they needed to see him. They are busy people. But Jae-young agreed without hesitation, and wanted to pass right now. The accountant was a little nervous, but kindly invited them. The director was delighted and greeted the guy, because they had not seen each other for a long time. The man exclaimed that the hero should say hello to the manager. But the manager noticed that there was no need to use these formalities. They were a family, and told the guy to sit down. After which, they wanted to get straight to the point. Then their leaders did not pay properly. Even though it is late, he still wants to pay back now, and put the suitcase with money on the table, or he will get paid for being back at work. In any case, the manager wanted them to accept his sincere gift. Suddenly, the guy began to take something out of his pocket. It was a pen with a surveillance camera. He was recording this conversation all this time. It seems they have already forgotten that they fired him. Everyone in the room was incredibly shocked by this outcome of events, and only Jae-young remained focused, but wanted to be allowed to show what a real informer is. The director was more shocked than anyone and was surprised that the guy was recording. Angry, he pointed out to the guy that this was incredibly rude. The manager also noted that this was very unpleasant and hinted that they were not to blame for anything. Whether they were guilty was up to them to decide, and Jae-young wanted to go through the list of crimes they had committed. Even my colleague couldn't believe that the guy was recording everything. Suddenly the manager turned to Director Park and asked him if he would just look at it that way. The chief director immediately began to approach the guy and wanted to remind him of something, and he immediately grabbed him by the jacket and began to threaten him. He shouted and asked how he dared to attack them, whether he seriously thought that if he was a civil servant, then he could do anything. Maintaining incredible calm, the guy politely asked to show respect to the director. I don't understand why he pokes him. Suddenly, the director began to swing his fist right at the guy. The colleague immediately rushed at the director and shouted at him to stop. After all, he has a video call with an employee of his department, and he asked not to do anything stupid. The director grabbed him by the collar and now he's being rude. Now his employee sees all this. Jae-young again asked to behave normally, because this only aggravates the situation. And now, he wanted to do everything like a gentleman. Then I thought where to start. Looking at the director and chairman, there were incredible debts over their heads, and a resolution was necessary when paying bonuses to the director. Suddenly, an accountant ran in because he heard screams. The accountant also had a huge debt hanging over his head and Jae-young asked him not to leave because he should be here too, and they continued. Tails Enterprise has a large profit. Chairman Kim made a huge profit from the deal with China, and Chairman Ma made financial cuts, and Director Chawi opened a new business in Busan. The manager admitted that this is why he paid them for it. He insisted that there was no problem with the board's decision and he paid everything. Jae-young immediately realized that he was referring to that fresh resolution, on which the ink had not yet dried. He himself found the tax adjustment certificate and saw that from the very beginning the board of directors had not made any decision regarding bonuses. The boss was amazed and did not understand how this happened, and the accountant admitted that he probably forgot about it. If the bonus had been paid before the resolution was written written, these would have been excessive expenses, they were related to the activities of the enterprise, and all this would have been subject to corporate tax. The income certificate showed bar and hotel room fees, which are included in Social Security. Suddenly, the guy noticed something else surprising. The accountant wanted to hide it and started laughing, after which he said that he would tell about it later. They even gave massages worth 10 million won here. The criminals were in despair. And so, next comes the balance sheet. This is a form of report on the balance of assets, liabilities and equity of the company at a certain point in time. The manager noticed that the inspector had gone very far, and the accountant shouted that he knew that not much time had passed since he started this job, and he was worried about the guy, because he had gone too far. Jae-young was glad that he knew who, where and when he came, but he knew nothing about him. The accountant was furiously angry, he literally began to rush at the guy, because he didn't understand that he might not know. He didn't understand the point of the law, and didn't the guy know that this was how their industry worked. The imperturbable guy knew everything perfectly and wanted to continue. The man was incredibly shocked that the guy wasn't even scared of him. Short-term bonds of the chief employee, after all, he paid himself severance pay in advance. The accountant shouted that this was money that he would have received anyway. But it is completely illegal, installment payments and short-term loans. No interest, no repayment, what is it? Then the guy wanted to move on to income tax. They literally begged him to stop because they thought he was a crazy bastard. At the same time, the entire dialogue was shown via video link to tax officials. Meanwhile, at the tax office, the boss turned to one of the employees. He wanted to know why the guy wasn't working. This was all because he was watching a newbie doing taxation. Everyone instantly exclaimed and ran up to look at it, because the youngest was now working on taxes. This was his first investigation and he is incredibly meticulous. In this situation, he is not afraid and says everything he should. It looks like he is the CEO. Everyone looked at his expression. And also for an accountant. This is the same guy who interrupted their lunch last time, and he threatened Jae-young. All his colleagues were watching him and wanted the guy to destroy everyone there. Late at night, events continued to occur at the company's office. They asked the director how many years he had been eating sashimi. It was the 17th year. The manager replied that this is true, in 17 years everything can change, but only one thing remains the same. The accountant immediately began to apologize to the president. The director's position in tail remained unchanged. The director apologized and wanted to take full responsibility upon himself. The old man understood that he could not do anything. He asked the director to just do one thing, but he couldn't handle it. Suddenly, he hit the man right in the face. And then he asked what he could do and ordered him to get up. The director bowed and begged him to forgive him. The manager was completely unshakable and did not want to forgive him, after which he kicked him in the stomach again. Suddenly, the accountant asked the president to wait, because he had one idea. He turned to a tax accountant and asked if he understood that he only had one chance and wanted to know if he was confident in his abilities. The accountant was sure that if the president gave him all the money, he would do everything, because he had previously helped the former district prosecutor. And he can discuss everything with him. The accountant will say that they had an illegal audit. He was going to lie, but there was no other choice, because these guys had gone too far, and besides, they couldn't be paid. The president turned to a tax accountant. He hugged him and said that this was really his last chance. If something goes wrong, then this time everything must be done without errors. Meanwhile, Jae-young was relaxing at home, and suddenly Director Lee called him. The hero did not understand why he was calling. He took the call. The director told him that they had not seen each other for a long time, and it seemed like the guy was home. The man didn't think that the hero could go that far. The guy just caught the person he was supposed to catch, but Director Lee just complimented him, so he called him and hoped that he would continue like this. And the director also added that everyone has to deal with their ex. He meant the former management. This referred to the official who previously worked there. Difficult. He immediately realized that for this he needed to have a lot of influence, but he started working only recently, and cannot eliminate such influential people. But still, he agreed, and the director asked him if this would be a problem for him. The director laughed and said that this was great. He was looking forward to meeting him at Samsung in the near future. The power they gave him is more than he thinks, and the guy should not lose courage. The hero will not care about those who evade paying taxes. The next morning, events continued to occur in the tax office. The hero and his partner calmly worked and filled out forms. Suddenly, Jae-young wanted to ask his partner if the Samsung office was a good place. At this moment, the partner realizes that he is a first year, of course, because he is among the top 3 best among the Korean tax service. Samsung, Seocho, Yoksum, also Gangnam and Banpo. He won't be able to get into them just like that. The amount of taxpayer income is also staggeringly large. The guy knew that it would be difficult to get there, and he realized that Director Lee also wanted to move up the list. Suddenly, one of the workers came in and said that someone had come from the prosecutor's office. The workers were shocked that it was the prosecutor's office that came. It would seem that they had something to do with it. My partner immediately realized that most likely it was because of yesterday. The director asked them to calm down and not worry. They did everything right. The men entered the office. They were from the Western District Prosecutor's Office, 3rd Division, Detective Tiv Ha-sung Pil. With him was another detective, Min Jong-hyuk. The director immediately greeted them and asked how he could help them. Suddenly, the detective recognized the director and was surprised that he was still working at the tax office. The director did not understand why they were here. The detective noticed that they had not seen each other for so long, as if he could not come and ask how he was doing, but this was not necessary, and the director wanted to find out what exactly was happening here. He gave him the document, and said that a request had come, directly headed by the Seoul Regional Tax Office. The staff of the investigation department had established the charge. The boss was incredibly shocked by what was happening. The detective immediately snatched the document from him, and note that he would find out about it later. As far as he knew, there were 2 people to be arrested here, but since he asked, the man could tell their names. This was not worth doing, and they immediately turned around and saw something interesting. It was the head of the Beomsun Tax Service. Even if some problems arise in their department, there is no need to organize concerts here, said the head of the tax service. And for this there must be a valid charge, such as aiding and abetting tax evasion, conspiracy, or bribery. This angered the detective, because he believed that they could not accept the charges. The head of the tax department noted that since they did not follow the proper legal system, this was inevitable. The detective was wondering since when this had become such an important procedure, but the head of the tax service noted that he was standing in front of the head of the department, and he should show respect. Min Jong-hyuk was amazed that he cared about this in the current situation. At the same time, the hero remembered how his brother called him an idiot. And he did this because he wanted him to stay out of trouble better. After that day, he made a promise to himself. However, he still became a stumbling block, and did not understand what to do next if he caused harm to someone. The head repeated once again that they follow the procedure and return. He will not give them his employees until then. This caused incredible indignation in the detective. He became very angry. At this time, Jae-young realized that now he is no longer the helpless one from the past, and he must honestly defeat this injustice. Meanwhile, when the detective went out into the street, he was thinking that he really had to nip them in the bud. But it was really strange. They really didn't understand why they were all covering up for one newcomer. Usually no one covered for the average nerd. It's even weirder how they remain so arrogant despite 2 managers being fired, unless they're betting on something. But in this case, this can be avoided if you simply shift the blame to one of the employees. As a friend, one of the employees came out and showed his middle finger, after which the investigator asked not to worry, and just do his job, to which he was demoted, and also, someone came to visit them. The detective could not smoke in peace, and this infuriated him even more, and he began to leave. After this, the employee notified the boss and manager, and Han was asked how the situation was outside. It was obvious that everyone was excited, asking who would be fired this time. His imagination was just running wild. The hero was very sorry that it was all because of him. He shouldn't have caused even more problems. Han was also a little worried and looked at the guy. Suddenly, the boss approached the guy and asked if he had forgotten about the principles of taxation, and throughout the entire investigation, he had not violated these principles, the man asked. Jae-young was confused by this question, but it didn't disturb them. And also, he had never bribed anyone or broken any laws before. The man explained to him that he had done nothing wrong, but here he was, apologizing to them, and he could do something better. Since he worked under him, he should ask permission before apologizing. The embarrassed hero again agreed to this. The head wanted to explain again, as investigator Kim said, the guy did not do anything wrong to them. The period of investigation and editing of the document brought by the person is 1 month. During this month, they managed to evade taxes once, evade taxes 3 times, and evade corporate taxes once. Tail's company has broken the law 3 times and they must answer for it. The man also remembered that Jae-young said he worked there before and asked if it was a place of private corruption. The guy immediately admitted that this happened really often. The manager immediately thought that there might be good and influential people in this company. Jae-young admitted that this might actually be true. He doesn't know their identity, but there were a couple of executives there. They said they would stay there for 2 to 3 years, so they just get their salary. This way they work the least but still get paid. The manager asked the boss if he still knew anyone in Cheonjeon. The man replied that of course he knew and would look into the matter. It had been quite a long time since he heard about Cheonjeon. Also, the prosecutors are coming soon, so they need to pack their things. The manager understood that the guy was still a newbie, and they couldn't let him leave just like that. But the guy was fine and was willing to just leave. The man was incredibly surprised, because he was able to say something like that so easily, and not prosecutors, they were just ordinary police officers. Jae-young would still have to meet them at some point. If he went there he might get a clue, maybe even a few. Myung-jong was the immediate supervisor of the district, so he could take care of all this. The manager happily agreed to these terms. It was starting to get dark, and the boss was still thinking about the situation that had happened. He recalled when the prosecutors returned again, and he said that everything would be fine, and the workers should not pay attention to them. The prosecutor said that from today onwards the third group will be disbanded, and the workers of the third group must wait for the order. Absolutely all the workers were outraged and did not understand what right they had to disband the entire group. Suddenly, another detective came and called everyone stupid. He started laughing and then asked them if they really thought they could win against politicians. But they continue, so each of them is just idiots. The manager immediately turned to the detective, but he again called the manager Kim Myung-jong an idiot. After all, the prosecutor told him that shouldn't he know that the laws will not protect him. It was after this that the manager decided to make a call. The next day, Jae-young went to the prosecutor's office. It was incredibly ridiculous that the prosecutor caught him for tax evasion, but sooner or later, he must fall face first into the dirt. The guy was given great power that will never end. That's why he could go wild. As soon as the hero entered one of the prosecutor's offices, he realized that he needed to concentrate. When he looked at all the workers, he realized that this was a jungle. There must be accomplices here somewhere, but obviously not this girl. And also, not this man. And finally, he found one of his accomplices. This man had 131 million in tax evasion. All the people around acted as if Jae-young was an empty place. They most likely want to put pressure on him at the very beginning. Suddenly, Detective Min Jong-hyuk approached the guy and asked him to come with him. This was good because they had already planned everything to catch him. They had to be careful here. The guy was asked if he knew what suspicions brought him here. But Jae-young couldn't answer this question, because he didn't know. The detective told him that 3 days ago, on the 27th, he caused great damage to a private business by conducting an unnecessary tax audit. The guy immediately realized that it was probably Tail Corporation. The detectives confirmed this, and he doesn't think it was an abuse of power, but Jae-young immediately interrupted him, because he adhered to the rule. Besides, he was accompanied by a detective. This was true, but not all the rules. There were records that because of him, information leaks had occurred in the past. In addition, Tail Corporation is also connected to this. After admitting this, the hero explained that it was related to a government service report, but the detective suspected that it could be simple revenge. Observing his actions, he got the feeling that this was all a well-planned plan for revenge. The hero was amused by this and asked him if the detective aspires to become a writer. The detective wanted to be completely honest. Tail Corporation is not without sin, but there is still something that he definitely planned. In addition, since Jae Hyun-sher worked in the General Affairs Department, Jae-young should be very familiar with the company's books. After this, the detective asked what the hero would do if he hit the bull's eye. Jae-young realized that the detective was doing this on purpose so that he would fall into his trap. The reason he said all this is obviously a trap. In a moment like this, the hero simply needs to tell the truth, and he said that he told it purely for purposes of public interest. The detective became a little nervous and asked if he realized that he had exceeded his authority by making a video call demanding documents be sent within 5 minutes. The hero smiled and said that he understood. Great, it was over. Now it was his turn to ask questions, and he said that the video was necessary because the other party was controlling his actions, and the documents requested were the only information needed, but it was not sent. The man began to get even more nervous, as if he himself was trapped. And it seems that the detective did not know about the moment ere they tried to bribe Jae-young with a large sum. Suddenly, another man approached the guy and asked if this was all part of his thefts. The hero realized that here he was, his real opponent, and asked him what he meant. The man turned out to be prosecutor Ha Sung-pil, and asked why he was pretending not to know that he embezzled a certain amount from himself when he worked in Tail's General Affairs Department, and then added that he could provide proof. Jae-young realized that prosecutor Ha Sung-pil was younger than he thought and about the same age as himself, and asked him for evidence. The detective asked his subordinate to take his leave, because he would figure it out himself. After which, he provided the corporate bank statements that he was in charge of while he worked there, and asked the guy to review it. The guy didn't even need to look because it was too obvious. They were planning on making him responsible for the money the executives were using. Ha Sung-pil I know turned to the guy, because as a government employee, he is testing his luck too much. However, if he puts it that way, he needs to take a step back and understand the story behind it, after which he asked what Ha Sung-pil was after. Since I have too much at stake for Jae-young, he needs to be careful. Suddenly, the detective started talking about getting the guy on his knees and begging in front of those he had pissed off. And then, who knows, maybe they will turn a blind eye to this. Of course, he is repelled by his answer. In fact, the detective said that he just received an order to do all this. The guy did not understand who it could be, the CEO from the Tail Corporation or the executive. No, assessing his level of self-confidence, it was definitely someone higher. After which, he suggested that we stop wasting our time and finish this matter. If he doesn't want to drag his colleagues into this matter, that's all. Jae-young was confident that there was a number above his head that proved that he was also a tax evader, and he immediately turned to the prosecutor. After all, he had the feeling that he was also involved in bribery. The man was simply amazed and asked the guy if he had gone crazy. If the amount is 130 million, then the bribe should be around 700 million. He thinks that the bribe was approximately 700 million, it will be problematic to get all this in banknotes, perhaps it will be a car. The prosecutor did not understand what he was talking about, for no apparent reason, and began to get incredibly nervous. It was wonderful, seeing how excited he was. Jae-young was right, he found his weakness, so now he needs to catch the right moment and attack. It seems that the prosecutor had nothing to say, and the guy thought that he was right. The thought that the South Korean prosecutor would be caught for bribery warmed his soul and heart. But the detective began to threaten him, because he still did not know whose attention he had attracted. People on the prosecutor's side need to be careful. This incredibly confused the prosecutor, and he called the guy a bastard. Suddenly, the prosecutor took Jae-young by the tie and said that he was just watching him, but he got too played and forgot about his place. Today will be the last day when the hero creates chaos without knowing the whole situation. The prosecutor continued to shout that the people he was prosecuting had pledged support from the former prosecutor general. It would only take a moment to get rid of someone like him. The hero was surprised, because it was a former prosecutor. Suddenly, another detective came in and asked the prosecutor not to say anything beyond that. But the prosecutor asked how he dared to forbid him to say anything, but this was not like a detective. Jae-young meanwhile, he was thinking about it. If this is the former prosecutor general, then the person who manages Lee Sun-jaeun said that this person is the benefactor of that person. Things are bad. He said that the prosecutor shouldn't mention anything about it, but Ha Sung-pil, that bastard. Once again, the prosecutor began to get nervous, because he realized what he had just done, as if he had gone crazy, and had been framed by a bastard like him. Suddenly, another man began to enter the office, and he asked what the prosecutor was doing holding Jae-young by the collar. It was Sunbeam, he came here to pick up Auditor Jae-young. The prosecutor became incredibly embarrassed, and he let the guy go. If Sung-pil continues like this, he will end up hitting someone. But he began to deny what was happening, saying that it was a misunderstanding. Jae-young still didn't understand who this man was. Sunbeam came here to ask for cooperation with the BSM tax office regarding the theft, but he did not understand why Sung-pil was behaving this way. The hero began to joke that they must act quickly. It is very important that there are no CCTV cameras here. Because of his insolence, the prosecutor immediately pushed the guy away. And after that, he sighed heavily, and Jae-young asked him why he was sighing. Looking at him angrily, the prosecutor replied that he simply had no words, and should not think that this was the end, and he asked the guy to look forward to the attacks. The heroes understood everything, because Ha-sung Pilshi must pay taxes on time. This answer completely infuriated the prosecutor. He was incredibly angry with the guy. Sunbeam went with the guy to the office and saved him, because the fight was incredibly close. After which, the man assured the guy that from now on everything was fine and he could breathe easy. From now on, he will be his associate, and is the prosecutor Ji Hyun-suk. A moment later, the assistant was pouring coffee for the two of them. He was hot, and the girl asked to be careful. And then she went up to Jaeyoung and asked him not to forget to thank the prosecutor. He heard about this news late, but did everything in his power to come as quickly as possible. The news was that Sung Pil was stalking Shin Ja-yeon. He heard about it the day before. The hero asked in surprise how the man knew about this, but he asked him not to look at him like that. Guy would like to know everything he can tell him about the current situation. The investigator liked the guy because he acted incredibly carefully. He was unexpectedly tasked with protecting Jae-young. To be more precise, it was his boss who did it. With incredible surprise, the guy looked at the investigator and asked what he meant. The investigator explained that this is a person who is taller than them. After thinking about it, the guy still didn't understand who he was talking about and deliberately beat around the bush, but he knew one thing for sure. In the same way that they support him, they also support this person, but he is from the National Tax Service, and the investigator is from the prosecutor's office. These are completely different institutions. Prosecutors support other prosecutors. Those who work at the National Tax Office support those who work there, but there is a reason why the two agencies are connected to each other now. Means that they support each other secretly. After which, the investigator said that subordinates like them just need to do their job well and they should start all over again, and he asked what the prosecutor accused the guy of. The charges were personal vendetta, problems with steps taken, abuse of power, embezzlement, and that seemed to be it. It seems that the previous investigator did not need to demand so much from him. If this is a problem with the proceedings, he should have discussed it with the tax office, not with the prosecutor's office. Jaeyoung never dealt with theft in principle, and it really seemed like the truth. If they were serious about it, then evidence of this could be easily found. And also, the previous investigator threatened that he would interrogate auditors and civil servants. The investigator then thinks that it is necessary for Shin Ji-hyun to find and understand the weaknesses of their department, after which he asks if the superiors are trustworthy. The hero immediately activated his ability to look at the investigator. He was completely pure. Despite this, he did not completely trust him, just because The investigator agreed with him, because it is his choice in deciding who to trust and who not. But he asked to be careful and not allow information to leak to rivals. No one knows a person's true intentions. And if any of them needed help, he said that they should not be afraid to contact each other, and the guy thanked him for his advice. There was no need to worry about this, because they can help each other if they need it. Since their enemies can attack unexpectedly, they should not let their defenses fall. It is with them that the hero will have to face. Meanwhile, events continued to occur in the tax office. The hero's colleague was asked when he would be ready to submit the documents. He filled them out in a panic, and asked for 20 minutes to do everything. Suddenly, a guy came up to him and asked him to eat at least this. It was the same auditor. Immediately, he asked if the prosecutor's office seemed like something special to him, but judging by Jaeyoung's face, it seemed like everything went well. First, they need to go to the office of the head of the department. Everyone was eagerly awaiting the hero's return. Meanwhile, the boss was furious, because he was infuriated by the annoying investigator, and the man did not understand how they dare to investigate the auditor's affairs. The director asked the head of the department to calm down. They need to take the first step. If they start acting, it will be too late. At the same time, Prosecutor Ji Hyun-suk seemed like a reliable person to Jaeyoung at first glance. The director saw that he needed to tell him everything, so the guy had to listen carefully. The seeds of doubt have been sown in Jaeyoung, and there are currently 3 tax departments. The first department is the Seoul Regional Commission. The second department is the Central District Commission. And the head of the investigation department, Min Chi-ho. Not counting these 3 departments, the district commissioner's sword is Koo Sung-ju. Due to the orders of his boss, quite a few leaders have already been fired, and it was unknown if there was a reason why the Seoul area decided to attack them. But this was not a battle between departments. The bone of contention is the Central Tax Office. Tail Corporation under the Central Tax Dome without interruption all the time, and they say that the boss was familiar with Koo Sung-ju. And in the end, to protect itself, Tail Corporation turned to both, the tax office and the prosecutor's office. They went this far to fire a low-level employee, but it was unknown why Prosecutor Ha-sun rushed to do something and took the initiative. The hero knew that he couldn't say that it was because he had discovered his tax evasion, and he simply said that it was not because of a specific reason, but whatever the reason, they had to prepare for counterattack. Koo Sung-ju has an extremely meticulous character. As soon as he feels that he is in a losing position, he immediately retreats, and the guy should be extremely careful, and find a way to catch this guy. It seems that Prosecutor Ha-sun is also involved in bribery, so they may begin an investigation in this direction. This prosecutor seemed incredibly strange, so Jae-young probed him a little, because he was on edge. He said he had the support of the former chief prosecutor and also grabbed him by the collar of his shirt. If this was a task that needed to be undertaken first, then the man believed that it was very doable. The head also agreed that nothing bad would happen if they studied it further, and it was worth checking out. What we saw seemed a little strange, and did not look at the stock exchange report, but when it was not yet registered, they bought and sold it. Moreover, there is a difference of 20 million won, no doubt someone gave the information as a bribe to someone else. After which, they wanted to find out who owned this exchange, and it was worth trying to open a contract for receipt. It indicated the Tail Corporation. These were those same corrupt bastards. Unfortunately, they didn't have enough powers to investigate, but this was indisputable evidence of tax evasion, but so far they cannot report it, and this is extremely disappointing. Suddenly, they also saw that Jill Company transferred 1.4 million shares to Ha Sung-pil at a price of 501 per share, and Ha Sung-pil immediately paid 7 million according to the purchase and sale agreement. It was impossible that a prosecutor working for 2 years could provide an amount of 7 million just like that. A bribe was obvious, but it was still unknown how they could accuse him of this. That's right, the way to benefit from this situation was very important. When all this is revealed, in this case, it's worth asking a friend for help, because it was needed. Since it has come to this, there are no other options other than how to ask for help, and Jae-young said that this matter should be left to him. Everyone was surprised, because they did not expect him to be able to do this. The hero wanted to answer honestly and said that he met a prosecutor when he was in the prosecutor's office. His name is Ji Hyun-suk, and he was going to get to the prosecutor Ha Sung-pil. In addition, the head of the past tax department and the accountant in the tax office are not being investigated, and he thinks that he can become a good ally. It was truly not difficult, but the colleagues needed to trust Jae-young's decision. The men were extremely surprised that the prosecutors were fighting against their own, but did not think that this was connected with personal matters, after which they trusted the guy in his decision. The director also confirmed that it sounds good, but they wanted to follow Jae-young's plan first. But everyone must be careful in their actions because the office is under threat. Suddenly, someone came up to Jae-young's partner while he was eating and told him to go. It was Jae-young himself who asked to print out for him the official document used in collecting tax without prior notice. He needed it right now. He wanted to catch a taxi, so he asked his partner to come down after that. With tears in his eyes, his partner agreed with him. At the same time, the prosecutor communicated with the district lawyer. When there is confusion, someone must know the best candidate to rely on, and he apologized that this retired old woman was asking him for such a problematic favor. Unlike other young people, the prosecutor seemed promising, and he said that the woman's request would not be difficult to fulfill, and he just wanted to get rid of the 7th-rank newcomer. The female district lawyer asked him to continue to work well, because he would soon hear good news, faster than he thought. She was incredibly powerful. The prosecutor was incredibly happy about this. It was great for him. Last time she gave him 700 million worth of shares, so he is excited that she will give him something more this time. This woman was an extremely important person, so he had no reason to give up the role of the district lawyer's sword. Suddenly, the man discovered that something had happened. It was as if someone had been brought in, and all the people were standing outside his office. All these people were waiting impatiently for the prosecutor. After all, very soon, he should hear good news, and thought that it was the district lawyer. The man was in incredible shock, and believed that she rewarded him on the same day that he gave her his word. But everyone present was incredibly nervous. The man did not expect this to happen so quickly. His heart was not yet ready to accept it. She is not ready to receive such a magnificent reward. Sighing heavily, the prosecutor opened the door to his office. As soon as he started to enter, he was already met there. So they met again and asked him why his lunch time took so long. The prosecutor was in incredible shock. he simply could not say a word, and he immediately began to close the door to escape. But someone held the door. It was the prosecutor. He asked him where he was going to run, and asked him to go and sit down, since investigator Jaeyoung was here on official duties. The prosecutor knew what he did, and as a prosecutor, he should take responsibility for it. He didn't understand what was happening and turned to Sunbeam to figure it out. When he arrived at his office and sat down, he was told that they were there to collect gift taxes from him. Jaeyoung is aware that prosecutor Ha Sung-pil became a prosecutor without any prior employment or simple work experience, but last October, he unexpectedly deposited the amount of 100 million 7 times even though he should not have done so, and the guy was interested in where the 700 million came from, and also why he didn't declare it and didn't pay the gift tax. The prosecutor was incredibly angry. He started shouting at the guy that he was a bastard, and wanted to know where he got this information and who he works for. The hero immediately took out supporting documents. Prosecutor G personally conducted the investigation for the sake of his stupid junior, and the guy asked him not to desecrate the title of prosecutor even more than now. Now the hero asked prosecutor Ha Sung-pil again, where exactly did he get 700 million won? Feeling incredibly angry, the prosecutor began to make excuses that he had borrowed them. But there was an account statement, and it spoke for itself. Whatever angle he looked at, it didn't say anywhere where the 700 million came from, which means that there was probably a private loan. Snatching the documents, the prosecutor did not understand what the hero meant by a private loan, and why someone like him should be privy to such details. Of course, he needs to know, he is a tax employee, at the moment he is fulfilling his duties. The prosecutor asked him to shut up. It didn't matter where his money came from and where it went, because it was none of his business. Jaeyoung hit the nail on the head and asked the man why he was pretending to be ignorant for these 700 million, and why he borrowed this money from the tail company. Suddenly, the ignoramus realized that this bastard came here knowing everything. Or he pretended that he knew everything. The prosecutor was interested in who this guy really was. And he shouted, why does he need to know who he borrowed money from? He borrowed them because he needed them. It can't be illegal, and he's trying to find the weak link like he did with Tail. Suddenly, employees of the prosecutor's office came in, and the prosecutor asked to escort these bastards out of his office. But another prosecutor interrupted him and asked to listen to the guy a little more. And everyone who is here now, if they do not want to be fired, then nothing needs to be done, and he does not need to be told who is in charge here. The ignoramus was immediately indignant, because he did not understand why Sunbeam began to behave so abruptly. Meanwhile, the hero continued to talk to prosecutor Ha Sung-pil and wanted him to explain one thing to him. A year ago, how he managed to purchase unregistered shares from Tail Company for 700 million won. But that's not all. A few days later these shares were registered, after which they became worth 2.7 billion won. This led to the emergence of a walrus of 2 billion, and how he managed to obtain information about the shares before they were registered was unknown to anyone. The prosecutor began to make excuses that it was just a coincidence. Jaeyoung saw this, but as he said, it was a coincidence, while he was able to acquire unregistered shares by chance. It was after this that Ha Sung-pil should have stopped. Immediately the hero asked prosecutor G what he thought about this. His thoughts were that to accidentally earn the sum of 2 billion requires incredibly great luck, but it looked like a big lie. The frightened prosecutor began to shout that he had been framed. And again, Jaeyoung turned to the prosecutor. He had asked him several times already, where he borrowed 700 million. If there was really nothing to it, then he should not have hesitated. Suddenly, the prosecutor suggested that Sung-pil stop this, and provided the investigator with a report on the duties of prosecutor Ha. It was a report of responsibilities that he personally wrote. He has obligations to pay in the amount of 700 million, and the place where he got this money is Tail Company. Looking at the report, it actually stated that he borrowed money from Tail's company, and he borrowed 700 million, and then bought such valuable shares from Tail. And it didn't seem like a coincidence either. This angered the prosecutor even more, and he wanted to finish Jaeyoung right on the spot. After all, he didn't understand how such scum could behave like that. The prosecutor began to shout that he warned him, and told him that his skin was at stake, and asked him to report to him about the bastards department, and he was going to investigate this case on his own, because he did not understand how a 7-ranker like him dared to want something in this place. Unexpectedly, the investigator slapped Ha Sung-pil. After all, he told him to stop. The man didn't want Sung-pil to show that side. But it didn't matter whether he was right or wrong, they all had to take responsibility for his actions, so everyone advised him to stop for the sake of his juniors, after which the man ordered him to be taken to the investigator's room. The prosecutor's subordinates immediately began to carry out the order, and the prosecutor continued to shout whether he seriously thought that he could stab him in the back just because he was his senior. The man ordered the prosecutor to contact his senior, and suddenly he realized that it seemed to him that Baek Hyo-yeon taught him to speak like that. Unexpectedly, the prosecutor realized that Ji Hyun-suk knew everything from the beginning. This was indeed the case, but it no longer made any difference whether he knew it or not. He was confident enough in himself to do it himself, because he was completely different. Jae-young meanwhile was thinking who Baek Hyo-yeon was. She was probably the predecessor of manager Lee's son Jaeun who was mentioned earlier. Now Jae-young must go against his predecessor. Now it turns out that Ha Sung-pil is just a puppet, and then his real opponent did not even show himself. The prosecutor told investigator Jae-young that he needed to be well prepared, because right now they were stirring up the anthill of one of the oligarchs. Some time later, events took place at the Seoul National Tax Office, in the regional office. The director started calling someone on the phone. A certain man answered the call. The director asked what he was doing now. The man replied that he was now sorting out the documents that he had sent, and thought that he would be able to send his report by the end of the day. After which, the director told him to stop working on the report, because the prosecutor's office made a mistake and they found out about the bribe. And the man needs to finish and clean up everything that is in progress, everything, and nothing can be left out. That bastard Jae-young, it's not so simple. If this bastard continues to investigate further, he will get to the bottom of them, and then everything will come to an end. With incredible rage and disappointment, the man realized what the director had told him, and memories came flooding back to him, how a man came to him in need of help. It was an elderly woman. She was here because she didn't understand how the commission was calculated. It couldn't be that high. She didn't even work, so paying such a large sum was too burdensome, and she asked if he could check if it was correct. But the man replied that just looking at it would not change anything, and she needed to file a complaint or ask a member of parliament for help. The lady was at a loss and did not know how to do this and what she needed to give, when suddenly the manager came up and asked what was the matter. The grandmother told him that he needed to look at it. They wanted her to pay such a large commission. The manager immediately asked her to give the document so that he could take a look. The manager immediately replied so that the grandmother did not worry. It may not be subject to such a tax if the farm is supported by one person. And when she leaves the building, she needs to go to the tax accounting office. There she should have the opportunity to get advice. The grandmother could not believe that if she went there, she would not need to pay tax, because the accounting office could help her. The elderly woman was incredibly grateful to Mr. Clerk, but it was okay because he didn't do anything surprising. After which, the man shouted at Kim Myung-jung and called him a bastard. He believed that Kim Myung-jung made him lose his face. But their job was to help the taxpayers, but the man thought it was their job to tax them. Kim Myung-jung immediately thought that this way he wanted to break his record, and might as well take a look at least once. They are government employees, not loan sharks, and they need to slow down. Because of this, the man wanted to teach that annoying asshole Kim Myung-jung. He was overcome with incredible rage, because he didn't understand how Kim Myung-jung and Jae-young were able to get out of that situation, these hypocrites. Jae-young was a Simmerang employee, and it was unknown, just why this bastard interferes in everything. At the same time, Jae-young and the prosecutor were drinking coffee, and the guy noticed that he also drinks vanilla latte, but it was a vanilla iced latte. That's what you need, and it's very tasty. It was as if a stone had been lifted from the guy's shoulders, because recently he had been very worried, but the prosecutor noted that he did a very good job. Such a confrontation with the prosecutor was simply amazing. The hero believed that this was all because Prosecutor Ji helped him. If not for him, he would already be in prison. Prosecutor Ji believed that thanks to him, he now understands why that person chose him, Jae-young. The guy immediately realized that this topic had returned again. Is it possible that he was talking about Min Chi-ho? But the prosecutor called the director of the National Tax Office that person. It seemed that he was pretending to know his name or really knew. He was the one whom the guy could not understand at all. Well, from the point of view of the prosecutor's office, it is right to get rid of problems like Song Pil, but it is not normal for the tax office and the prosecutor's office to work together. The prosecutor thought it was incredibly exciting to think about the battles going on behind their backs as he thought about the consequences of their actions. He felt vaguely about the heroes, but now he is sure that there was actually a big shot behind this than they originally thought. And there was a feeling that he had gained the power of a guardian of the law. This power forces makes his heart beat faster. And immediately he asked Prosecutor G, because he said that Ha Sung Pil was just the beginning. And this is true, Ha Sung Pil was just a simple pawn, and the instigator who gives orders is another person. Baek Hyo-young, former prosecutor of the Seoul Eastern District. This woman retired a year ago and now works for Manhwa, a law corporation. Well, if Jae-young investigates about her, all the answers will be there, so try to take a look at her properties. She will not have any property registered in her name or her children's name, which means she is using a bank account under someone else's name. But they don't know about her parents' estate. If they think of going against her, the prosecutor thought it would be better to dig deeper into her parents. Jae-young immediately felt that the prosecutor was confident that he would be the only one to go against her. This was indeed the case, because only Jae-young would be able to attack her. But they also say that the best defense is attack. If he does not attack first, they will bite him, and they will do it very hard. Some time later, events continued to occur in an expensive car. There was the same woman on the phone who wanted to buy some shares using her daughter-in-law's name, but the daughter-in-law Nuna herself felt very burdened by this. But the woman did not ask anyone else's opinion, and no one dared to interfere if they couldn't even do anything around the house. The woman was talking to her husband, and said that the money they had saved before was enough for them to live comfortably, and it was worth stopping. Nuna said that she was scared. Baek Hyo-young didn't understand what her husband meant by the word scared, as if someone was going to chase her and then kill her. He was too worried, and the woman didn't understand why her daughter-in-law was so worried that she was shaking with fear. The husband didn't mean that she didn't like her name being used. Baek Hyo-young wanted to know what he meant by the word uses, because who said that she was using her name? The woman thought that she was scared by such nonsense. They should stop talking nonsense and tell her to make a new bank account. Suddenly, something shocking happened, and the expensive car crashed into the car that was driving in front. Even the woman who had an accident in this car was stunned. The ash from the cigarette fell directly onto her purse. She was incredibly furious and couldn't control herself. The man immediately asked for forgiveness, and he was very sorry that this happened, because the car in front stopped abruptly. The woman was getting closer and closer to the man. The man was sweating from excitement. He did not know what would happen next. Baek Hyo-young wondered what he would do next, whether he was an assassin or whether his fate was predicted. Suddenly, the man began to cry, and through his tears he said that this was not so. Looking with wild eyes, the woman ordered him to drive more carefully. Meanwhile, Jae-young and his partner were heading somewhere again. They came to Menhan's law office. The partner was incredibly excited and wondered if they could do it. Yesterday they returned from the prosecutor's office, and to think that today they came to the law office, people might think that they have nerves of steel. Jae-young turned to Mr. Secretary, because as long as he works with him from now on, it would be better if he forgets about his nerves. After this, they began to enter Manhwa, a law firm. The same legendary woman was walking along the corridor of the company. She was warned by staff that guests were coming to see her, but she said she was not expecting anyone. It was said that he was an auditor and a civil servant from the Beomsun tax office. Suddenly, the woman was struck by the fact that someone had arrived from the Beomsun tax office. This is the place that was investigating Taeil's case not so long ago. She remembered that same call from Ha Sung Pil. Then she told him if he had done anything, and how dare he even bother and irritate her. The woman believed that the stupid man had failed to take care of something that could be hidden, and then ordered the government employees to be let in. Suddenly, it turns out that they were already waiting for her right in the office. They arrived from the Beomsun tax office. The assistant immediately introduced himself to Secretary Hwang Min, but the woman wanted to immediately get down to business and talk. Jae-young immediately realized that her confidence was in the sky. Then should he check her for tax evasion? The woman also thought that Jae-young was incredibly self-confident, when suddenly the guy discovered that she had a debt of 9.8 billion. It was simply unimaginable. The guy didn't understand how she could take so much for herself. After which, Jae-young asked the woman if she knew why they were here, but she didn't know why they were here, and she also didn't know who they were. For the hero, this was incredibly sad. although just recently they were trying to grab him by the throat. This is the reason why he came to see him in person. The more the woman continued to listen to this, the more she did not understand anything, and asked her to stop wasting her time and tell her the reason. The hero agreed, but was sure that she immediately forgot about it. Then he will tell her so that she doesn't forget. And the guy threw a piece of paper on her table. It was Prosecutor Ha Sung-pil's business card with his phone number. It was impossible that she wouldn't remember anything after seeing this. The guy came here just after the capture of Prosecutor Ha Sung-pil. Tax Beamson, Shin Jae-young, a 7-rank official, greets Lawyer Beck. The woman lawyer did not understand at all who this Jae-young was, and why this bastard Ha Sung-pil's business card was here. It seems that she has not heard about it yet. Hubby, whom she treasured so much, Prosecutor Ha Sung-pil, Jae-young eliminated him. Well, of course, this was not the only reason, and he also blurted out everything about the woman. It was at that moment that she remembered who he was and what was going on, and immediately realized who Jae-young was. The fact that he told it all was a bluff, but the guy hoped that she would fall for it. If he caught her, then the game was over. Smiling, the woman asked if he could defeat her. She wanted to see written evidence or something like that, but if they want to prosecute her, they'll need the prosecutor to intervene. But she was the head of the prosecutors, and she thought that Jae-young couldn't be so confident in himself, and the guy realized that it didn't work. Baek Hyoyeon agreed with everything, and wanted to assume something, because he doesn't know how this world works, even if there is a prosecutor who is brave enough to go against her. The most important prosecutor was still in her power, and soon another person would appear instead of Ha Sung-pil. And even if she becomes a defendant, the lawyers will still be on her side, then Menkon will finish the case at the first hearing. As a result, the woman believed that she was much more confident in herself compared to the 7-ranked employee Jae-young. Realizing this, the hero realized that preventive measures were not working, so this was a rather unobvious result. But this is exactly what he expected. Baek Hyoyeon is an oligarch who has been working in the legal world for decades. He could die if he clumsily demonstrates his abilities in front of such veterans of the field, and will never win using this path. Baek Hyoyeon noticed that the guy was so quiet, it was cute for her, and she asked if he understood that he should calm down. It's a fact, he can't resist against her. After all, the guy was about 30, in these years he must work hard, but saying this, he will not survive if he does not know the limits. Even the assistant thought that it was better for them to leave. The woman also said that if he is too hard, he will break, but if he is too flexible, he will soften. In order to live, he must learn to feel the balance to do such work. Jae-young suddenly asked her if she paid her taxes well. If he fought against her on her field, he would have been destroyed, but I wonder what would happen if the battle took place on his field. The guy was curious whether she, a former prosecutor, now a lawyer, evaded paying taxes or was involved in theft. If she is confident before tax audits, she will easily pass them, because in his field he is very confident in himself. The hero saw this. He saw how she staggered slightly. This old tiger trembled. The woman immediately asked if Jae-young could do this and if he had any fear. But the hero is just doing his job. That was fine. After he caught even a hint that she was the initiator, that was enough. The assistant wanted to take the guy away, but Jae-young didn't give up and suggested that Lawyer Beck play a fair game. Playing prosecutor and lawyer, mocking the law, even a 7-rank official like him would be outraged. The woman began to drink furiously, saying that he was just a talkative petty 7-ranker, and they needed to get out of here right now. Some time later, they ended up on the street and left her office. The boss asked the hero if he should have done this. Baek Hyoyeon was not just the CEO of a small mid-sized business. Jae-young guessed they would use all their connections to try to stop him. There can be no battle without victory, and he told his assistant not to worry, but he again asked him how confident he was. Other Beamson employees could become targets one after another if something suddenly went wrong. There are a lot of rotten people in this world, and the more they indulge them, the more they rot. After all, these are people who are no different from them, so the assistant should not worry. If something happens, Jae-young will protect him and the entire department. The guy made a promise to his assistant, but he still didn't understand what he was going to do with Baek Hyoyeon as an opponent. Jae-young is not the kind of person who would do something like that just to boost his own ego. The events continued at the moment when the unknown people communicated with each other. They said that someone was a little late. The unknown person was working, and he could not call him during working hours. The caller seemed like he was just used to calling him, and there was no point in getting angry about it. The unknown person was wondering why he was calling him. the caller was wondering if Jae-young was going to give up. But unknown, I replied that no, he would never give up. The caller was surprised by this. He warned what would happen if the unknown person did not convince him. Suddenly, it turns out that investigator Hwang Min-woo was communicating with an unknown person. The unknown inquired whether the assistant knew how long he could withstand, but the assistant did not understand what the unknown meant by withstand. Of course, he was talking about whether he could handle it if his brilliant Jae-young, who he works for, committed suicide. This shocked the assistant. He did not understand what the unknown person was talking about. This call was being recorded right now. The unknown person said that the man might try to report it when he does something rash, and he should think about what will happen to his Jae-young, colleagues and bosses. The assistant realized that the investigator wanted to commit reprisals against the entire investigative team right now. This only made the unknown person laugh. After all, they live in the 21st century, and why shouldn't he use such methods? A simple and provocative method. Group suicide is the ideal method. Thus, it will appear live on the news, for fear that the crime will be exposed, bosses and executives. An ultimatum has been issued. After which, the unknown person asked what the assistant thought about it. After all, with such a strong feeling of guilt, Hwang Min-woo will also go and hang himself. The guy didn't understand at all why something like this happened to him. Just why, he didn't know what he could do in this situation. Meanwhile, Prosecutor Ji sent Jae-young a list of Baek Hyoyeon's family members' assets. Although there is no real estate history here, it shouldn't be a problem. After the Ha Sung-pil scandal, Baek Hyoyeon's side turned their backs on him. The important thing is that the truth cannot yet be made public while the tax and prosecutor's offices work together. This is a direct order from his support. He needs to take very good care of this. Suddenly, the boss asked him to come over for a minute. The boss ignored what he had done so far, but to some extent, this is what he can do, but as long as the guy is going to be reckless, he had nothing to do, so in the end, he decided to dig under Baek Hyeon. After catching the prosecutor, he decided he could catch the former district attorney too. The manager asked him to think rationally, because he was a tax officer, not a detective, but the guy again repeated that he needed to do this. Tail company support Baek Hyeon, and Ha Sung-pil received orders to attack Jae-young. If he stops, they will try to attack him again. Indignantly, the boss began to scream, because he wanted to know why he did not contact the police. After he reported this, they would be able to protect him. Secret actions like the ones he was doing were much more dangerous. But the guy insisted that in order to protect everyone, this was the best way, and if he made this public, including him, this entire place would be destroyed. Rather, he thought that it would be safer if he was their only target. But the manager still believed that he was deceiving himself in this way. But he gave the go-ahead for him to go and take revenge himself, but if he backs down, he knows who it will hit. After that, Jae-young took all responsibility into his own hands. There is a high probability that Baek Hyeon's assets have evaded taxes. If the former district attorney is playing with the law, then she must pay for it. And the guy will never lose if he acts in the name of the laws of this country. The manager didn't even understand how a scumbag like him worked for him. Suddenly, boss said that he knows that he has a list of assets of Baek Hyoyeon family members. Because of this, there is pressure from above to stop Jae-young. And if he wanted to conduct a secret investigation, then he should not be caught. But after he was exposed, the boss wanted to know what he meant by taking on this responsibility. Jae-young was stunned, because he realized that they would find out about this from above. The hero was as if in the palm of Baek Hyoyeon's hand. He had to first understand his place, and then miss. The wise guy immediately realized that there was probably an informant who conveyed all the information. Suddenly, the hero went outside and asked his assistant for a lighter. After all, he completely forgot and left his in the office. The assistant agreed, and without hesitation gave him the opportunity to light a cigarette. As if nothing had happened, the assistant said that he heard that it was going to rain today. Jae-young noticed that today it was indeed a little cloudy. But also, Jae-young wanted to tell his assistant about one thing that was incredibly bothering him. The man couldn't believe it. It was unexpected, to think that even someone like him has worries. And it was true that the assistant wanted to know what was causing him this feeling of reluctance. Something happened that he never expected, and the assistant wanted to know what had happened to make him like this now. Jae-young has a friend whom he trusts very much. But as it turns out, he was there to find out about his weaknesses. Well, not that his weaknesses are anything very serious, but since this man is his friend, he was happy to tell him about his weaknesses. But that's not the problem. The problem was that in the end, he sent it to his enemies, pretending that the assistant did not understand anything. He asked why to do it. But the hero didn't know, and thought that only he knew the answer. Perhaps Jaeyoung was never his friend. The assistant was noticeably nervous and said that anyway, what about listening to him later? There is a saying, if you want to find out who your enemies are, start with your friends, because they know all your weaknesses. Hwang Min-woo was shaking with fear, because he was afraid that the hero would expose him. Suddenly, Jaeyoung asked his friend why he did this to him. The guy immediately bowed down and began to cry, because he was incredibly sorry, because he had committed a grave sin. He received threats almost every day. They said that getting rid of some people, as they have been doing for a long time, is as easy as shelling pears for them. And he called himself his friend. He wanted to be like him, so he gathered all his courage into a fist and tried his best. But it didn't work, and recently his daily life became just a nightmare. He was incredibly sorry. He worshipped and cried. It was then that Jaeyoung vaguely realized that he might have already lost to the laws of this country. After this, the assistant firmly decided that he himself would write a letter of resignation. This is what a traitor like him should do. The man kneeling in front of Jaeyoung is not just his elder, but the one in whose place Jaeyoung could have been. If he didn't have the support of Lee Sun Jaeun, he would also be part of the weak people like his elder is now. The hero recalled that once the woman herself told him whether he really believed that he could win, the 7th-ranked Inspector Jaeyoung. Watching how these people demonstrate strength, and how helpless he was. Suddenly, the hero asked the guy if the elder remembered what he said then. He said that he would ensure the safety of the people in the department, and of course he was one of them, so Jaeyoung asked him to answer honestly. And he immediately asked if his assistant had received any bribes. The guy continued to cry and said that he had never done such a thing. It was an incredible relief for Jaeyoung. The hero gave his hand to the assistant and told him to get up, because they have work to do. The assistant was in incredible shock, because he couldn't believe that his boss would forgive someone like him. This was true, of course, because he still wants to see what the elder is capable of. Some time later, events continued to occur in the law office. The woman was outraged that something had happened, since they decided to call her first. It was her husband. He heard that she took the account of his cousin's wife, and asked not to do this, because she already received many other people's accounts. This person is not someone she can use at her discretion. Because she is their family, their friend, and her husband begged her to stop this. The woman didn't care. She started laughing very loudly. She didn't want to do it because she knew what she was doing, so she told her husband to mind his own business. The older woman didn't see anything wrong with being used by stupid people who want to be taken advantage of, and she shouldn't think about those whose names might be used to buy shares. But then, she knew all the names and registration numbers, so she can use them, the numbers of her husband, daughter-in-law, and younger cousin, as well as brother-in-law. It doesn't matter to her who they are, because they are just her dolls. This is the law, and they are all her toys. You can't make money by working like everyone else, like the rest of the bunch of stupid people. Stealing from these people is not a problem. Suddenly, the woman again had someone knock on her office. She was indignant, because she was not expecting guests. And again these were representatives of the tax service. With incredible indignation, the woman met Jaeyoung and his partner again, but she warned that there would be consequences after their second visit. Since she also ignored his warning, he could do the same. Because she must be fair and pay taxes regularly, they have police and lawyers to catch people. But instead, they threatened his senior employee. Because she can't even pay her taxes regularly. The hero made his signature move. Now there is no turning back. It won't end until one of them dies. With incredible indignation, the woman shouted that he was trying to set her up, using such a topic. He thought that she did not know what he was doing. As long as the prosecutor's office and lawyers are in her hands, he will not be able to do anything to her. Jaeyoung understands this, but he thinks he will catch her using tax laws. The old lady couldn't believe it. Until the moment he came to her office, he looked at how many secret names she had, and she also had 5,000 payon of land in Yapen with her husband. And also, she regularly transferred shares to her daughter-in-law, Daesung Electronics, and Sajin Pharmaceutical shares. These shares were transferred in a total amount of about 20 billion. Now his opponent is merged instead of confused. From now on he cannot afford to make mistakes. Unexpectedly, the woman rushed at him, because she wanted to know where he got it, but Jaeyoung noted that she should not behave like that, because she is a lawyer. Like a small child, she tried to take his documents away and find out where he got them. Everyone in her family and all her friends, they are just chess pieces to her. The assistant, meanwhile, was thinking that this was an evil woman, and now he found out how much money she spends on companies. Even though he is already an adult, she doesn't even respect him. But she clearly shouldn't have thought that the senior mate was an idiot. To avoid the idea that she's using him because she doesn't want to pay any taxes, she's using him without paying him a cent. Who knows what the old snake is up to this time? The woman noticed that she was being filmed, and Jaeyoung again asked if she agreed that she was using secret names to evade taxes. The hero thought about how he could tell that someone was caught by their eyes. But no matter how experienced the beast is, there is no need to be afraid, because there are people supporting him. The woman began to threaten Jaeyoung again and grabbed his jacket. She believed that he couldn't do anything by doing this because someone like him thought that she couldn't break him up with just one phone call and then bury him in the wilderness. He only has one life, so he should live it accordingly. Just a little nervous, Jaeyoung continued to talk about how he needed to watch her try, but it would all turn out to be a failure. Jaeyoung looked her straight in the eye and asked if she really thought he was afraid of the former district attorney. This angered the elderly woman even more because the hero called her now a former district attorney. She thought everyone here was a bastard and they were going crazy. Jokingly, the heroes answered her that she was right, but, however, he would take it as a compliment. And then he asked if the woman was giving herself an account of what was happening now beyond the field. Immediately, Jaeyoung showed a document confirming the property that her relatives owned, which confirmed that their lawyer's property belonged to them. This stunned the woman even more. She was speechless. This meant that all the money entrusted belonged to them, and with this, time to strike the final blow. When the enemy is shaking terribly, soon this woman will become a beggar. These were her relatives, she treated them so well, she didn't understand how Jaeyoung dared to do this to her. The hero addressed everyone. What property is managed by Baek Hyen? And he came here because he found problems in this regard. Soon they will conduct a tax audit. Those who own her property will be involved in the investigation. All the relatives were incredibly outraged, because it wasn't even their money, and they didn't know what to do. This could indeed be problematic for them if a police investigation were involved. However, there is a way to avoid this. They can only keep it if they insist that all the property truly belongs to them. Baek Hyen began to scream furiously and snatched the document from the hero right out of his hands. If she continues this way, it will be considered obstruction of justice. She continued to shout that it was her money and she earned it herself. Now Jaeyoung will go back to the office to let her relatives pay the taxes. It will be good since they are the only ones who own it. As if distraught, the woman began to run towards the hero and wanted to attack him. Jaeyoung meant that she said that this was not her property. After all, as much as 20 billion are at stake. Because of this, she cannot pull herself together. Meanwhile, the woman was going to call somewhere. She was getting more and more nervous by the second and asked him to wait to make a phone call, because who knows if he was lying to her or not. But this was too much. After all, they are civil servants, and they will not lie so blatantly. First of all, the old woman called him and wanted to ask if he had signed documents confirming ownership. The man replied that he had indeed signed them. She was outraged to the extreme, because it was her fortune, which she had saved with great difficulty, and did not understand why he thought that he could become its owner. She simply said to take care of it, but did not say that he could appropriate it for himself. On the phone, the man said that she had done a really good job of listing their registration numbers and using them as she saw fit. She had to do a good job herself, and Hyeongnim couldn't take it anymore, and was about to hang up. The woman literally begged him to stop. At that moment she realized that her husband had abandoned her. Like a true gentleman, asked the lawyer lady if she was done with her calls, because in that case, they should continue the proceedings, or she could claim it as her property and pay the taxes. The hero did not understand why the woman was leaning. In any case, she would not be able to escape. Whether everything is confiscated or she is punished for using other people's names, everything depends only on her. Just in case, Jaeyoung also brought documents for her, confirming the ownership. If she puts her seal here, her relatives will not be able to take it from her. The woman did not understand at all what was happening, and she was not adequate, and thought that this might be some kind of deception. But there was no catch in this. Jaeyoung just gave her a chance. It is at this moment that she has to make her choice. Everything she has accumulated will collapse. For some reason, she didn't think about the fact that her real enemies were always closer than she thought. Her hands were shaking and she was about to stamp this document. It was a good idea and just needed to be stamped. Thus, the woman made her choice. Jaeyoung was pleased and thanked the woman in advance for paying the taxes. Kneeling in front of the guy, she wanted to know how much tax she had to pay. Since she had not paid for a long time, the amount came out on its own, and he also hoped that from now on she would treat her relatives well. Because the closer people are, the more careful she must be. However, Jae-young was afraid that he would have to go to the prosecutor to confirm ownership. Sooner or later, all property will still be confiscated. Because the fortune she made was obtained through all sorts of illegal means. Thus, it will all fall apart. As they walked off into the sunset, the heroes said that they had done an incredibly good job. Jae-young asked what it was like for the elder to see this in person. The guy couldn't believe it at all, and he wondered if Jae-young would tell him how it was possible to do this. Jae-young wanted to tell the elder that he would move higher. Using all means, he will be the blade that cuts away all the garbage of this country, but he doesn't think he can do it alone. That is why he asked the elder if he could expect help from him from that day forward. The elder bowed to him and thanked Mr. Inspector. Jae-young was surprised, because the guy suddenly began to cry. They were going to do even bigger things together in the future, so there was no point in crying over such things. Some time later, lawyer Baek Hyoyeon was detained by the police. In the news cover photo, her face was incredibly ugly. The former district prosecutor illegally amassed 20 billion won in assets and was caught trying to take over the assets under the names of her relatives. Both sides claimed that the assets belonged to them and were in the midst of legal proceedings. A man came in for a meal and was wondering what he was looking at if he wasn't answering messages. Another man was reading an article about Baek Hyoyeon. This article was an incredibly masterpiece, so the man thought, they should have put aside their impressions, because it seems that he picked up a good sword. But in fact, the man did not take anything into his hands, but simply gave him a little power, and he skillfully wields it. He is one of those people you don't often meet. As it turned out, the prosecutor was also someone's sword. One sword attacked, and the second assisted. The man had dreamed of such a perfect combination of working relationships for so long because he couldn't leave them alone to fight against so many bad people. They just have to keep a good eye on them from now on. As the two men observed, their swords grew incredibly fast. And they also had a plan, following which they would collect their best swords and raise them in the name of a righteous goal, namely, the capture of vile people. After all, this was precisely their long-awaited dream. Well, if they rush, they will understand everything. And they need to be careful. If they take the initiative, then these guys may be attacked. But there was no need to worry, because it didn't matter where they had to step, they were just shields and decoys. Right now they just needed to gather more strength. And the men drank sake for their future. Meanwhile, events continued to occur in the tax office. It was all over the news that former district attorney Baek Hyoyeon was embroiled in an outrageous lawsuit, with her family claiming the assets belonged to them. The manager was incredibly surprised that Jae-young did it all on his own. From that moment on, the man was absolutely sure that the guy had left his wing, and he immediately asked him if he was preparing something in secret. A little worried, Jae-young replied that not yet. The manager and the general director watched his every move and came to only one conclusion. This confused the hero a little, but he expected an answer. The managers heard something from the head office that the situation in the 3 divisions of the National Tax Office is unstable, and that the director of the first investigation team, Min Chi-ho, has a rather rough sword. There are also rumors that the sword of the director of the first group is Jae-young himself. The hero did not even deny this, and said that it was really so. As the manager suspected, the only one who gives him power is Director Min Chi-ho, and the manager immediately realized that in this case, he was now carrying out his instructions. But in fact, it was just the opposite. He only wanted power, the power to catch all tax evaders. That's why every step he took was of his own free will. It was really like that, since Jae-young is not someone who can become someone's informant. The shocked manager couldn't believe that Jae-young was Min Chi-ho's sword. The hero immediately asked if Director Min Chi-ho knew about this, but the manager was not sure. There was probably an idea since the entire nation was in turmoil due to the struggle between the Seoul government and the central government agencies. And at that moment, Director Min Chi-ho suddenly appeared and created 3 divisions that exist to this day. Thanks to this, peace has so far been maintained and a stable hegemony has prevailed. Either way, this is the end for the Tail Company and for Baek Hyoyeon. From now on, the manager asked to tell him about all the actions that Jae-young will do, since he does not want to get a heart attack because of it. A little later, Jae-young was sitting outside drinking coffee when he suddenly saw his assistant. The assistant bought a couple of buns and wanted to treat Jae-young, but he told him that there was no need to worry about him to such an extent. But in reality, it was just etiquette, and the assistant asked him to just accept it and he would look after Jae-young like Alfred. It's like Jae-young is Batman. Suddenly, Jae-young remembered something urgent and started running. He remembered that he was supposed to meet the man who was on the bridge. The hero immediately apologized for being late, because he was a little late, but the man told him that there was no need to apologize, because there should be no apologies between them. The director won't have to, just like last time, so Jae-young could eat in peace. For the first time, he will eat such high-quality beef sashimi. The man, meanwhile, said that he was incredibly surprised. To think that Jae-young would actually go after the soul of the former district prosecutor is not something that a person with the usual amount of tenacity can do. All this thanks to the support and assistance of the director and head of the department. And the sashimi that was on the table was incredibly tasty. The man was very grateful that Jae-young returned with such results. They exceeded all their expectations. But the hero was also very grateful to them for their help. Prosecutors and lawyers are quite difficult opponents if they commit crimes, and not only did they think that he would attack, but instead, he ended two at once. This result in itself exceeds all expectations. Jae-young couldn't wait for his next assignments for next year. And the man suddenly asked him to come to the Samsung tax office right now.